Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We have quorum, so we will going to get going. First order is not on your agenda, is to welcome Derek, who I think has met all of you now, and to welcome you to this group. And I know all the work you've done in the past month as well, so thank you.
You're very welcome.
Approval of the agenda. There are two additions to the agenda. 8G, we have names for the Cultural Heritage Working Group, and I'll give you those when we get that far. And item 12, there is an item of correspondence. And they all have copies of these?
Yes.
Yes, so you will have copies of that on your desk. So with those two additions, looking for a motion to approve the agenda, Councillor Doherty, a seconder. Zoe, thank you. Discussion. Those in favour? Those opposed? You have an agenda. Confirmation of the minutes of January the 16th. Don, you have a comment, I think.
Yes, a minor, very minor suggestion referring to page 5 of the minutes, reference to Mr. Sims. His name should be spelled S-I-M-S, not with two M's, and it should be Mr. Craig Sims to make it clear who he is. And I would suggest stopping the next sentence. Mr. Gower commented that Mr. Sims is nationally recognized, and stop there, because we don't want to suggest that we never need to look carefully at what he's proposing.
Okay, thank you. Other comments on those minutes? And seeing none then, those in favour of approval, those opposed, you have a set of minutes. Pecuniary interest. We haven't talked about this, have we? Basically, if you're going to profit from any of the decisions made, you need to let us know ahead of time, and then your discussion. And I know Jim and Bridget will be quavering that because it's far more complicated than that, but that's the idea. Anybody have interest in any of the properties we're discussing today? Okay, seeing none, and I always add, and if you suddenly realize later on that you do, please speak up at the appropriate time. Presentations? None, thank you. Delegations? Seeing none. Briefings? See how fast we get through the first page? Cultural heritage, engage for change.
What? Okay. So thank you all. I'm here to introduce the report that you have in your agenda package. This report was also circulated via Dash, and I have an opportunity slide at the end of this very brief introduction to talk about some of the questions that were posed, but also happy to receive feedback on how this came to you via Dash and ways that we might help to enhance or improve that process. So I'm here to just very quickly to talk a little bit about the Engage for Change YGK Reconciliation Journey Project. This was discussed a little bit in your introduction package on your first committee meeting. Kingston is on the Indigenous and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, and is home today to approximately 7,000 urban Indigenous community members. And Kingston also serves as a regional connection point for Northern Fly-ins, Tyendinaga, the Mississauga at Alderville First Nation, Charbot Lake, the MNO, the Métis Nation of Ontario, Alderville First Nation, the Huron-Wendat at Wendake. And so we engage with Indigenous community members, both within Kingston's resident populations, as well as those who are now finding themselves in the sort of catchment areas or service catchments that surround Kingston today. So the Engage for Change journey really comes out of a number of recommendations and directions from Council, which I won't go into detail here, but you will have noticed that City Council begins with the recognition statement read by the Mayor and extending sort of an acknowledgement of both land but also intent in shared partnership and how we work together as a community. And the endorsement of that recognition statement really marks the beginning, and the release of a Purposeful Dialogues report marks the sort of a moment in recent history where we started to frame out what a reconciliation journey could look like for the City of Kingston, and Engage for Change became that project. When Engage for Change was first visioned, it had one phase. It was supposed to run for about 18 months, 16, 17, and be completed with a protocol that the city would adopt. And through that first phase and kind of going into it, we started to realize that this was going to require a longer time period. This is heavy work, and a lot of community education is needed, but also a lot of conversation and communication with Indigenous community members to get their perspectives and points of view on a number of city-related matters and initiatives. So phase one, which ran through 16-17, was really about non-Indigenous community education programs and increased opportunities and support from the city's perspective for programming and cultural events. And at the conclusion of that phase, we returned to Council with a document sort of reporting back on the findings of that first initiative and got support for another phase, which will runs through 2018 and 19, so we're in the second year of the second phase now. And the second phase is really to continue that programming and event support, but also to begin a very concerted effort to have a facilitated conversation with Indigenous community members or community members who are Indigenous to talk about their priority needs and things that we need to work on from the city's perspective to build better relationships and to move forward in a good way. Phase 3 right now is not scoped out. We have to wait for the conclusion and findings of phase 2, but phase 3 will include, hopefully, a return to that protocol development, some commitment for a process for how the city engages, particularly in consultation with Indigenous community members and groups. So it's an integration of phase 1 and 2's outcomes, and also we're hoping to be able to propose to Council a sustainable model for future event support and programming. So the 2018-19 phase has involved, as I said, targeted, facilitated conversations, and these began in earnest in February. On February 10th, we had the launch event of a facilitated dialogue with community members. We know what we're working toward with community members, but we're also open to suggestions of other priority areas that we may need to work on or address. But over the last 4 years, it's become quite clear and was restated at that February 10th event that the community is really looking to develop actionable next steps towards the creation of a community council or committee that would work with City of Kingston in some capacity to help inform and assist with city-led directives, and also very much in need of a cultural gathering space, so a community resource space where they can share teachings, have cultural practice, smudge, and do many of the things that are quite difficult, actually, within the current sort of structure of the city-held facilities. So knowing that these are two priority pieces, this facilitated engagement is really working toward those initiatives and finding those actionable plans. So how do we actually start to move these balls forward and make some gains in these needs? There is a timeline that was shared in the report for the execution of that facilitated engagement. And I don't want to downplay this, it's certainly very important, but it's a very targeted engagement. What I'd like to spend just a little bit of time on is the community-led programming and cultural events. So Council committed $40,000 to support community-led programming in 2018 and 2019 under the banner of Engage for Change. And this has led to support for National Indigenous Peoples Day, World Indigenous Peoples Day, powwow attendance when powwow is not held in Kingston, Sisters in Spirit events, as well as the Cataraqui Indigenous Wellness Day. And we continue to create partnerships to create and support community-led programming. This is not programming the city organizes itself, it's community-driven, but we provide now some funding and models for sustainable development of those programming initiatives so that we can help to move that forward with the community. The other piece that Council committed was $20,000 towards community education initiatives. And these have generally followed a talking circle format. We make small partnership agreements for $2,000 grants that allow for the hiring of an Indigenous facilitator, the provision of Indigenous teachings, particularly around reconciliation and the history of the Kingston community. And we see that then as a mechanism, particularly to bring information to groups that maybe know that they don't understand or appreciate or have the deep understanding of the community in Kingston, but also about reconciliation more broadly in the residential schools in particular. So we've been creating these partnerships for talking circles as well. So at the end of the report, really, what's the call to action to the committee today? What we're really looking for is feedback. So one of the mandates, of course, of this committee is to share the information about the things that we're doing. But also you can question about the engagement timeline and the initiatives that are coming forward. I'm also looking to see if you have any suggestion for ways of updating the general community about these initiatives, information sharing not only with Indigenous community members themselves, but with the broader community. If you have thoughts about where you yourself might be interested or know others in your circles that where they would want to look for Indigenous cultural education and reconciliation, and suggestions, particularly, as I've said, we've got $60,000 for community events and educational opportunities, and right now about 60% of that is spoken for, and so we are looking for continuous partnerships. So suggestions for organizations, events in the community where there might be educational opportunities where you think Engage for Change would safely nestle. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, feedback on the DASH system. This report, the meat of this report was put into DASH. I hope that you received notification of it being posted. We've not used DASH in this way before, so happy to receive feedback about how you receive that information and how we can help to make that better for you so that you might be able to offer comments outside of this conversation here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? That list of how can you help is on page 5 of your package underneath the table there. But does anybody have particular questions? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you for your presentation. It's a very important initiative, this one. Even sometimes we don't realize how people, even young people, teenagers, are still affected by their parents' experience with residential schools. So it's a legacy that people are, it's still having repercussions. And I know that from my daughter's experience in a local high school and some of her friends who've really suffered. And I think they ended up in drugs and alcohol, and one young man that I know ended up homeless because of his parents' experience. So I think we often talk about it as a historical thing, but it is still actually very much alive today, the repercussions of the residential schools. So with that in mind, I just wonder if I could hear a little bit more about the need for a place for ceremony and how we're moving forward with that.
As I said, one of the comments and community needs that has resonated quite clearly throughout the last 3 years is the need for a cultural space. And there are a number of kind of operational considerations and barriers around that. So right now, the facilitated engagement, one of the scoped outcomes is an actionable plan to the achievement of an operating model, essentially, for a space like that. So who would organize it? What could a city relationship with that facility be, if one is even desired? And so there is no promise that, or a requirement that the city itself will be asked to support necessarily a space. This is really an exploratory journey together, but understanding that the facilities that are available in town right now are quite limiting in the ways that they can accommodate ceremonies, and those that can, particularly accommodate smudge, have to have specific air handling systems, and they're very limited and in incredibly high demand. So recognizing that there might be a number of different suggestions coming out of this, but that's where we are right now, is to move the desire into an actual plan, particularly identifying how it would be managed and operated, and then think about how do we actually get a space.
Other questions? Yes, done.
In action with your suggestions about local organizations that might get involved, I wonder if you've approached churches. That might be a bit controversial, but there might be benefits. I don't know.
Thank you. I think it's a reasoned suggestion. There's no preclusion of any group, faith-based or otherwise, from seeking education. So, certainly I think faith communities are a good suggestion. Thanks.
When you go home and think and suddenly remember what it was you meant to say, the list then is on page 5, and your email is, I think, there. And is Dash still open for this?
I'm not familiar with how or when we would close Dash, so I'm going to look to the planning group.
But there's between that and between your email into the city.
The Dash invitation should have also included my email.
It did.
We wrote that into it, so I can certainly be contacted that way. We're working to see if whether or not a form for feedback on Dash would be more assistive, but I will explore a little bit more about the Dash side. Again, we're learning as well about how to use that system in the best way possible, but the idea would be that you could sign in to Dash and do your sort of heritage committee work on one sort of platform. So, thanks.
Good. Last thoughts? If not, thank you. Policy development and implementation. I gather we have nothing. Heritage assets, reports from the museums. Stat business, 73 Baden Street. Part 4. Hi.
Good morning, everybody. So we have before us an application under Section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act for 73 Baden Street. Heading's wrong. So 73 Baden is located at the intersection of Baden Street and McDonald Street at the northeast corner. The property contains a 2-story limestone house that was constructed around 1869, maybe slightly afterwards. The subject property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, which is an individual designation, in 1978 through designating bylaw 9360A. So the reasons for designation are fairly brief, as this is an older bylaw, as we discussed at our first meeting in January. So this limestone house, built circa 1869, is a typical village dwelling of the period, with the verge boards adding a decorative touch to an otherwise simple residence. And if you want to search for a little bit more information on the building, Volume 3 of the Buildings of Architectural and Historical Significance does provide a little bit more detail and description of the building in terms of its evolution. So the property consists of the original limestone house, but as well as a rear addition that you see in front of you that was constructed in the 60s, 70s. The rear addition appears to have been partially built over an earlier, perhaps original summer kitchen, so you can actually see where the limestone foundation ends on the addition and then it continues on in concrete brick block. When staff visited the site, we were able to go inside this newer addition and look to see the actual old exterior wall of the original or older summer kitchen addition. So the rear addition is currently 2 stories high, consists of a pitched roof on the west elevation, and on the east elevation, the addition steps back from the northeast corner, steps out again, creating this sort of substantial reveal, in which there's currently a patio deck. So this reveal is the location proposed for the new addition to the house. The existing rear addition is not considered to be a heritage attribute of the property, nor does its design follow current best practice. So in other words, the height of the addition should really be lower than the original house. The exterior wall should be set back from the main walls of the original house, so that we have a massing that's clearly secondary to the original house. So the kind of core consideration when we're looking at this proposed addition is really whether the new addition conserves the cultural heritage value and attributes of the original house. So the largest alteration proposed here is a 2-story addition that largely fills in that existing reveal on the east elevation. The addition is proposed to be set back approximately 46 centimeters from the northeast corner of the house. And the cladding is proposed to be a horizontal wood siding with a cove detail. The setback of the new addition from the northeast corner of the house allows the original form of the limestone house to be visually appreciated and understood, and will not materially affect the existing rear, which is the north elevation of the house. So in other words, the limestone masonry and the 2 wood sash windows on the ground and second floors will be retained within this addition. The design allows the addition to be easily distinguishable from the original house and clearly secondary. It also makes the addition reversible. So in other words, if this portion of the rear elevation, if we removed this addition, you could actually return the rear elevation back to its original composition and conditions. So this follows best practice and complies with Parks Canada standards and guidelines. In terms of glazing, the patio doors and windows are proposed to be aluminum-clad wood windows with a 1/1 glazing pattern. They do comply with the city's policy on window renovations in heritage buildings. The windows being replaced are not considered to be period windows or heritage attributes of this property. And lastly, 2 skylights are proposed in the new roof plane, and this is a result of the building code requirement. So essentially, the upstairs bathroom, the windows to the upstairs bathroom will be covered by this new addition, so this provides the fresh air access. Architectural detailing and finishes include the wood detailing, which I mentioned, the wood siding, which I mentioned, which is distinguishable but also very complementary to the limestone masonry. And the long-term intention of the property owner is to remove the rest of the existing siding on the rear addition over the longer term and replace all of it with the horizontal wood siding, which will represent a significant improvement in terms of the appearance of the addition in relation to the house. So the rear addition does currently replicate that verge board that we see on the original house that was noted in the designating bylaw. The applicant is not proposing to replicate the verge board or reintroduce this on the new addition, which does follow best practice. So we want to stress the importance of legibility between new and old. And in other words, if we were to put a new verge board on the addition, you would want it to be distinctive in some way from that original verge board. One Heritage Kingston member actually suggested that the applicant might consider removing the verge board from the rest of the rear addition, and the owner has responded that this is actually their long-term intention in combination with replacing that wood siding or putting on the new wood siding. So beyond the new addition, other alterations include the removal of a pair of windows on the ground floor, which you can see to the right of the screen, and the installation of a door and side light. We also have a new roof light, skylight on the original house, and again, that is the result of a rear window, bedroom window being covered by the addition, so again, a building code requirement. Staff have included a condition to better see the details of those skylights, just to ensure that they're flush with the roof line. They are fairly well set back from the front of the house, but there will be some views where they may be visible. And the last piece of the application includes the construction of a new wood patio with privacy screen that connects the addition to the outdoor space. So this deck replaces and slightly enlarges the existing wood deck, and the privacy screen is to be attached to create some level of privacy from the street. So staff have included a condition. We want to see a few more details of the screen, but right now it's proposed to be vertical wood, painted, but obviously we want to make sure that doesn't in any way visually compete with the building. So one Heritage Kingston member did note that there's potentially a sort of suburban character with the sliding doors and this raised deck, and is there maybe a chance to step that deck down and even create a patio at grade? And staff did find this to be a sound alternative, and we actually suggested it to the property owner, and the property owner will be considering this as an alternative as well, because they're not necessarily dead committed to this aspect of the project. So in conclusion, the alterations proposed in this application will conserve the cultural heritage value and attributes of 73 Baden Street. So the recommendation before you is to approve the project as proposed, which includes several conditions relating to building permits. A minor variance does need to be obtained. Details of the privacy screen, windows, and the color scheme, as well as the skylights. So I'll leave that with you.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments as we go through for new people. On page 6, you'll notice that it says the application was declared complete on January the 10th. The time frame will expire on April the 10th. Once that application has been deemed complete, the city has 90 days to make a decision. If it doesn't make a decision, the application is assumed to have been approved. That usually gives us 2 council meetings, sometimes 4 council meetings, 2 months. Sometimes it gets a little bit awkward, but do keep that in mind. We're normally well within that time frame. The other question that I will ask before anybody else does is the details that you've presently got on the screen. Such things as details pertaining to 3 new skylights shall be submitted to heritage planning. When does that have to be done by?
Mr. Chair, so that should be done before they are installed. So essentially, as soon as they have approval from council, they may start submitting all these details as and when they finalize those details. So this is simply a catch for those finer details that they may not have selected the precise model of skylight. So when they do, they'll submit them to staff so that we can give
Okay,
them
so
approval.
the council approval comes and then the details are sorted out. Thanks.
Correct.
Questions from committee? Councillor Doherty.
I know the property quite well, and I believe the renovations will actually improve the existing property. But I have things to learn, so I'm going to ask about the gingerbread. I know you're talking about the legibility between the new and old, but looking at the roof line, you can easily take down the existing gingerbread carefully and then incorporate it in the new construction. But I guess the best practice is to differentiate the new between the old. So I wonder if you could speak to that a bit.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. So best practice would say, if you look to the standards and guidelines, as well as the ministry's guidelines of cultural tourism sport, essentially when you do a new addition to a historic property, you really want to be able to understand, and down the road, 20 years later, when nobody knows what happened to that house or building, what is new and what is old, to be able to understand the evolution and be able to document that in the future. So, in other words, it's not to say we couldn't support some type of verge board on the addition, but best practice today would say, and policy would say, that you wouldn't actually replicate the exact detail of the verge board. You'd change it in some way so that someone who was looking closely at the building in the future could differentiate. So really the option was sort of open to, you could have no verge board on this addition, or if you chose perhaps to pick something slightly different. Yeah, thanks.
Don?
Excuse me, I'm fine with the this project, but I'm still a bit puzzled by the skylight. Can we look at page 20? Perhaps I'm not reading the blueprint or the drawings properly. Not that page. Page 20 in the written agenda, printed agenda. I guess people can see it. It shows, it appears to show that there's open space from the ground level up to the roof. In the new, yeah, no, sorry, this is the one I'm looking for.
Sorry, it's not on this presentation. I have it flipped to the bright page here.
Yeah, okay. Looking at that, the skylights apparently are needed for providing light into the bath area, but the skylights don't appear to be over the bath area. They seem to be over the new part of the construction, which already has all kinds of windows in front of it. So either the skylights have to go right up to the roof ridge line, or something else has to happen in there.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So as I understand, we do have the designer here to confirm that the skylights are intended to be over what is currently a bathroom.
Right.
So the bathroom's existing sash windows will be covered by the new addition, although it is floor to ceiling. So they'll have access, in a sense, to the kitchen below, but they won't have access directly to fresh air. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I'm... Okay. I'm going to ask the designer to make sure they can clarify.
Coors, designer of this little project.
Morning,
Skylight-
welcome, sir.
The skylight, in fact, as you say, over the, let's call it an atrium. It's a two-story addition, and it's 2 stories high. The bathroom is behind the double skylights, and there's one small window which looks into this new addition. The intent of the skylights is to let lots of light later on in the day, when the sun is going towards the west, let lots of light down into this thing, into the kitchen, which goes back to the west wall of the house, and also let more light into the bathroom. That is the intent of those double skylights.
Well, certainly the kitchen and the atrium would appear to have plenty of window space already, but certainly there's no objection, I guess, to having overhead light coming
No,
in.
I think it'll make a big difference. In the latter hours of the day, it'll make a big difference. Because that's an east-facing wall. So once the sun starts to head west, it'll darken up quickly. So that's the intent of those skylights, essentially.
Okay, I'm satisfied. I was
Okay.
just puzzled. Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you.
Other questions? Jane?
Yeah, I actually have another question. Skylights, because the intent seems to be to let fresh air in to the bathroom.
The intent of the double skylights is strictly for light. The single skylight is over an existing bedroom, and on the north wall of the original house is a window which is going to be closed in, so we got to get fresh air.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay?
I have nothing to add. That helped to clarify. I might have confused the issue of the bathroom versus the bedroom requirement. Thank you.
To the committee, are your comments on dash clear? Don't have to? No, part 4. All been looked after. Last thoughts before I put a motion? You have, the recommendations are on page 7. With conditions. I won't read them all through unless anybody wants me to. Looking for a mover. Bridget, seconder. Done. Taylor. Further discussion? Seeing none. Those in favour? Those opposed? That motion is carried then. Thank you very much. And we move on to 221 Queen Street. Denise, yeah.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So we have a property, an application in front of us for a Part 4 designated property under the Ontario Heritage Act. So this property is located at 221 Queen Street, which is on the northeast corner of Queen and Clergy Streets, known locally as the former Queen Street United Church, and now is home to Sanctuary Co-working. So this building, built in the 1920s, actually replaced an earlier building which was built in 1886 in the same location, and this was destroyed by a fire. The property was designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act in 1981. The designating bylaw notes the property's architectural significance, speaking to the tower, the large Gothic window to the south along Queen Street, and the series of Gothic arches to the west, which are along Clergy Street. An application for alteration under Section 33 of the Act has been submitted to request heritage approval for alterations to a number of existing window and door openings, as well as the introduction of new window openings on the north, west, and east elevations. The applicant is requesting approval to renovate an entranceway on the south elevation along Queen Street, which is the only renovation proposed along Queen Street, and to replace all the translucent glass in the ground floor with transparent glass in order to allow suitable light for the apartments that are proposed in the basement floor. So I'll just go over kind of the elevation and the proposed alterations to each. A lot of the committee members attended a site visit on site, so this is a refresher for you guys and an update for those of you who weren't able to attend. So on the west elevation, which is fronting Clergy Street, the applicant is proposing to introduce one half arch window opening on the ground level. So there's evidence that this was previously a window. There is a sill and an arch already there, so they are proposing to reintroduce a window in this location and to introduce one new window convert an existing ground level door to a window, as you can see kind of towards the left there, and to introduce a new window opening adjacent to this existing door. So these actually aren't visible from Clergy Street. The rendering doesn't show, but there's actually a building there that kind of blocks that view. On the north elevation, the applicant is proposing to introduce 5 new window openings to align with the size and arrangement of the existing openings, and to widen the existing door opening on this elevation to allow a standard door, which will allow suitable egress for fire code purposes. On the east elevation, the applicant is proposing to introduce 1 new peaked window opening and convert 3 existing openings in order to create 2 peaked window openings of the same size and configuration. Through internal circulation, it was determined that fire shutters may be required on this elevation to satisfy the requirements of the Ontario Building Code. Staff has included a condition in this report that any final specifications tied to required fire shutters are circulated to heritage staff so we can attempt to mitigate the impact of those however possible under the requirements under the Building Code. On the south elevation fronting Queen Street, the applicant is proposing to alter the east entranceway, which currently provides access to the gym, so the one with the CrossFit signage there, in order to be more consistent with the law office door, which is further along Queen Street. So introducing similar paint color and wood detailing around the door, but there's been a condition included based on Heritage Kingston comments around the specifications to the door to make it a little bit more sympathetic to the building rather than this full glass door that's at the law office there. So this proposal limits the majority of alterations to those elevations that are not readily visible from the public realm. The new window openings that have been proposed are planned to align with and complement those existing window and door openings. The proposal aligns with the standards and guidelines as outlined by Parks Canada. Staff and Heritage Kingston members, as I mentioned previously, met on site with the applicant regarding this proposal. Committee members were generally supportive of the proposed works and provided some recommendations in regards to the design of the new openings, and I've included these as recommended conditions in this report. So these recommended conditions include that flat arches be provided and that the existing stones that are removed to form these openings are reused for this purpose where it's feasible. And also a condition has been included that new sills should be constructed of concrete, and this aligns with what Alex was talking earlier about making the window openings a little bit legible from those existing openings which have stone sills. A condition has also been included related to the new door design, as I mentioned, on Queen Street in terms of the amount of glass permitted in that door and the paneling detailing. And a condition has been included that the final paint selection for these window frames is reviewed by Heritage staff before painting is undertaken. So staff have no concerns with the proposed scope of work and recommend approval of the application subject to the conditions outlined here, which I've gone over with you here. I'll leave that there.
Regarding the fire shutters, I'm just not seeing your guys's it in the conditions portion. It's specifically called out. Is that just in all window alterations to be completed?
Just take a look.
Okay, so I've included this as a scope of work, but it seems like it was missed in the subject condition, so that's certainly something that we can add just to make sure that staff have an opportunity to review those. Thanks for catching that.
No worries.
Comments, Don?
I'm a little concerned about the way one of the conditions is stated, condition 3, which refers to new window openings, and it says stones shall be retained to provide flat arches. Now, I don't know whether the intention really was to have flat arches on all these new windows, but I think if so, I think that's a mistake. I think the arches should match the existing windows, which have arched voussoirs. And, I could speak to that later, but I just want to clarify at this point, do you really mean flat arches, or are you intending to build arches similar to the existing windows?
Yeah, so the intention here is to provide arches that are, I think there may be just a terminology issue here, but the intention is to provide arches that are consistent with those currently on the existing openings.
Could you say that?
Yeah, the intention is that those existing on the property, so those existing in the existing window openings.
Other questions? You're not sure on that answer yet, Don. Do you want to? Okay, fine. So, members of the public? Yes. Oh, yep, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to clear, I think as Ms. Grant has mentioned, the condition number 3 there is just not worded the way that I think we want it to be worded. So the intention is, you can see on page 61, there's a rendering that shows the arches over top of the windows, and they are arches, and the intent there is to retain stones to recreate the arch as existing if and when there's an opportunity to do so. So it's not to create a different form of arch, it's to recreate the arch in the form that exists today. It's just the way that it's worded, I think, maybe is just confusing things.
Okay. Yep. Seeing none, then we look for a motion. And again, without reading it all, it is on the bottom of page 39, plus the conditions on page 40. Looking for a mover. Don, looking for a seconder. Jennifer, thank you. Discussion. Yes, sir.
Generally, I'm very impressed with the proposal. I think everything has been planned and to protect and enhance the heritage attributes of the building. But I think I would like to see more accurate wording in that condition. And maybe I could comment, since this has been discussed before, for the benefit of some of the newer members. If a heritage window has been altered and the intention is to repair and to renovate it, then I think best practice is to return it to its original configuration. Even if you have to use new materials, they should be shaped and so on, so that it looks as it originally did. On the other hand, if you're creating a new window, as we are here, it should be done that it looks harmonious with what's there, so that the appearance of the facade looks right. But on the other hand, it shouldn't deceive people into thinking that those are original. And so that's why the point about the sills of the new window openings being concrete rather than stone, if someone looking closely will see concrete sills and they'll say those are not original windows, and that's fine. But I think the arches should look the same as, reasonably closely the same. So I'd like to move an amendment to slightly reword condition 3 to read stones, and I have a copy here for the secretary. Stones removed to create new door and window openings shall be retained where possible to provide jamb stones and voussoirs for the new openings. The voussoir arches for new windows shall be what have I got here? Shall be similar to those for existing windows.
Do you want to speak further on that?
No, I think the vote is full.
Okay. Further comments on that? Need a seconder, Jennifer? And seeing nothing there at all, okay. Can I have it? Sorry for it. Any further amendments or comments on the amended motion? We'll go firstly then on the amendment, which in condition 3 says stones removed to create new door and window openings shall be retained where possible to provide gemstones and voussoirs for the new openings. The voussoir arches for new windows shall be similar to those for the existing windows. Those in favour? Those opposed? Okay, to the amended recommendation and conditions on page 39 and 40 with the amendment. Further discussion? Seeing none, those in favour? Those opposed? That's carried. And I would add my comment to Don to this whole project, that thank you for letting us visit and doing such a wonderful visit and for the work that's being done here. So thank you for guiding it through, and thank you all those of you who were involved in it. Okay, we move on to page 72. We're going into part 5, and we're at 87 King Street East. Alex, it's yours, yeah.
Hello again. So as the chair mentioned, 87 King Street, the application is a designation under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So this is an application under Section 42 for alteration. So 87 King Street is located at the southeast corner of the intersection of King Street East and Simcoe Street. The property contains a 2.5-story brick house constructed circa 1909. The property was designated in 2015 as part of the Old Sydenham Heritage Conservation District. It is evaluated as being significant to the district. It was designed by Joseph Power, a well-known local architect. The property inventory evaluation form describes the building as a 3-bay, 2.5-story brick house on a stone foundation, and does note that all 4 of the building's elevations are visible from King and or Simcoe Street. The form also notes many architectural features that are associated with the building's Edwardian classical style, as well as, interestingly, it does note the 1.5-story brick garage that's located to the rear, which was built at the same time as the house and in the same style. So staff visited this site back in October, and we wanted to note that the house does have a noteworthy architectural presence. It's surrounded by mature trees and vegetation, and occupies a prominent corner along the King Street corridor. Its north, east, and west elevations are highly visible from King Street East streetscape, as well as Simcoe Street. And also, given its position and setting, you can also quite visibly see its rear elevation when you go walk down Simcoe Street. So from the exterior, the house appears to have been very well maintained. It's retained its architectural integrity, so the brickwork and wood detailing, for example, the eaves and brackets, look to be in good condition. The house appears to retain all of its original wood windows. And beyond the addition of the sunroom, back at the sunroom at the southwest corner of the building above that veranda, which was likely constructed shortly after this house was built, there have been no obvious exterior alterations to this building. So this application proposes a significant rear addition linking the original house and the detached garage. which has the effect of altering the architectural composition of the rear elevation, and given its location on a prominent corner, will also impact the side views of the house from the east and west. The addition includes a second garage, an elevator allowing access to all floors of the house, a new accessible entrance at grade on the west elevation, 2 rooftop decks, and the replacement of the existing sunroom on the second floor. Additionally, the applicant proposes to replace the existing entrance door in the west elevation, which is accessed via the veranda. So in looking at the Heritage Conservation District Plan, the key section we look to primarily here is section 5.2.2, which speaks to additions. So I want to note that the design of this addition has benefited from multiple rounds of design review by the committee, which has led to substantial changes in the detailing of the addition. So initially, staff and the committee had concerns relating to the addition appearing to be overly institutional and somewhat commercial in character, which was felt not to be compatible with the existing house. And this was primarily related to the at-grade accessible entrance as well as the rooftop deck entrance. These elements have now been revised, as you see, from the top being the first iteration to the lower image being the current proposal. These elements have been revised and now are complementary to the main building, clearly secondary in terms of their size, and this is an explicit policy of objective of the plan. The addition of wood eaves and brackets to portions of the new addition, including the rooftop deck entrance, as well as multi-paned windows, has had the effect of softening that institutional character of the addition and does complement some of the existing architectural features on the house. So this section also speaks to the need for additions to be clearly distinguishable in form and detail from the existing building. And although the brackets and multi-pane windows are being reintroduced on the addition, the precise design of the brackets can be subtly differentiated from the original house. And then obviously the new windows will be aluminum clad windows as opposed to just simply wood windows. Additionally, the introduction of a new cladding material, which is the fiber cement board, will help to make a very clear distinction between and legibility between the original house and this new addition. So in accordance with that section, the addition is located well away from the main street facade at the rear of the building. It does not add to the width of the building. However, given the high visibility of this property from multiple directions, which is an unusual situation, the design of the addition was carefully considered in terms of its impact on the architectural composition from all directions. So in response to this guideline, the applicant has ensured that each elevation has been designed to be compatible with the architecture. So for example, the window patterning on the east elevation of the new addition has since been modified to reflect the multi-pane patterning on the west elevation as well. And although this elevation is less prominent than the west elevation, it is still visible from King Street East and will be visually read in the context of the existing elevation. So, for example, this consideration would not have been so pressing on a building that would be located mid-block and surrounded by other buildings. The section also notes that the height of the addition should be no more than that of the main building, preferably lower. This addition is clearly lower in height. The majority of the addition is 1 story in height. The highest element of the addition is the elevator shaft, which has been the subject of much discussion. And there's been a lot of discussion specifically on the prominence of this elevator shaft and what design strategies could be used to minimize the visual impact. So the final design solution that staff supports includes the cladding of the shaft in fiber cement shingles, so as opposed to the horizontal siding, and in a slightly darker shade, potentially different shade than the horizontal boarding on the rest of the addition. We did have one Heritage Kingston member suggest limiting the elevator access to the second floor, or perhaps moving it further north to the rear of the house, or simply revising its design to include windows and a roof, potentially to read as sort of a lookout tower. It is staff's professional view that the most practical solution in this instance is not to draw attention to the elevator shaft or falsify its perceived function and use. So as such, the elevator shaft is located, it's at the rear of the building. It's not higher than the roof of the original building, and it has been clad in a different material, different color to help soften its appearance. Staff are essentially concerned that if we were to add additional architectural features, we might actually draw attention to it as opposed to try and minimize its impact. So finally, I want to talk about the construction of additions and how we don't want to entail any sort of removal, covering, or other adverse impacts on the heritage attributes. So in terms of this addition, It will necessitate the replacement with a new design of third floor dormer windows on the rear elevation. And this is largely the result of the installation of the elevator and its accessible connection at the third floor. So the original house currently has 4 dormer windows, hipped, 2 of which are hipped roof dormers on the front elevation and 2 shed dormers to the rear. So the 2 shed dormers are the ones that are proposed for replacement. And although acknowledging its loss of heritage fabric, arguably these shed roof dormers have the least architectural and visual impact on the design overall of the house. And the replacement dormer design will maintain the visual interest, which is part of the sort of interest of this roofscape with the multiple dormers. Secondly, the addition will require the removal of a small rear kitchen servant's entrance on the rear elevation. So this observation was relayed to the applicant initially, and the proposal has now been to sort of retain an element of the roof line of that original entrance service. So you can see on the east elevation, you'll still be able to read where that entrance was through its roof form. And lastly, the sunroom is proposed to be reconstructed. We know that it wasn't built at the same time as the house, but we believe it was built fairly quickly after the fact. It is in poor condition, and the reconstruction is very similar to what exists now. So the main difference is simply that a portion of the southern elevation will not be reconstructed due to this elevator shaft. So I'm going to quickly talk about roofs, windows, and cladding in an attempt to get through this presentation. So in a nutshell, the proposal complies with the roof policies. Views of the roof are limited from the rear to the south. We've got the replacement of the dormers, but we still feel the objective of the policy of 5.3.1 is being upheld. There are no proposed alterations to existing wood windows on the house, and the new windows do comply with the window policy. And lastly, staff support the proposed cladding, which was initially proposed to be a brick veneer, and there were a lot of concerns about how to match a new brick to this brick house in terms of color, patina, and so essentially now the proposal is much clearer. So it's a horizontal hardy board as well as fiber cement board shingle, and this will help differentiate the two, and staff are confident now with this option. We've had one member speak to the color of the cladding, and we've included a condition, so there's still discussion that we can have on that color to make sure that it is appropriate. So I'm going to jump to this image. So the last alteration I want to speak to is just simply the section 5.4.1, which provides general guidelines for alterations to heritage buildings in the HCD plan. And specifically, I want to just speak to this existing garage, which was noted in the inventory form. So we do have a guideline that I've not yet addressed, which basically says garage or carport additions are discouraged. So in this application, a second garage is proposed as part of this large addition. The addition that links the main house to the detached garage specifically. And this 1.5-story brick garage is mentioned and described quite in detail in the form. So this addition will obscure the existing door and window on the north elevation of the existing garage, but it will otherwise conserve the architectural form and features that the garage has been described as. And the new garage proposed, the second garage, is set back from the front elevation and proposes a garage door that will match the existing garage door to the south. And staff are of the opinion that the addition of the new garage is really secondary to the overall design of the addition, so we don't see it as being sort of a simple, straightforward new carport or garage, but it's simply part of and integral to a much larger design of an addition. So, in conclusion, the addition has been designed in such a way that fundamentally respects the original configuration and style of the house. The stepping forward and back of the new addition helps to break up its massing and reflects the variability of the massing on the original house. The new addition has been set back on the west elevation to conserve the south portion of the rear veranda, and set back on the east elevation to conserve a portion of that original kitchen servant's entrance. And moreover, the design features on the historic house have been incorporated into the new addition and help to architecturally tie the addition to the house. So I'm just going to leave you now with staff's recommendation, which is to support the proposal, as well as, I'm going to flip to the next page, quite a number of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Committee members, you have dash comments printed on page 106 to 112. Are they reflective of what you were trying to say? Members of the public, questions, comments?
I just had a question.
I've got to public first,
I'm
Jennifer.
sorry.
Yep. But seeing none, committee members then, Jennifer.
Just in regards to how the windows developed, having not been part of the initial pre-consult, how, like I understand that we're supposed to have a differentiation between new and old. And for me, the multi-pane, like, definitely immediately ties me to it being part of the original sunroom. I know that there was initial comments about it being too commercial, which I agree that the new massing deals with, but I wasn't quite sure if the multi-pane windows were a specific issue that was brought up by us, or how that sort of evolved into it. If that's okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sure, in terms of specific comments with the windows, I don't believe there was a lot of specific discussion on the windows. It was more a design response to the overall feel of the building. So the applicant, as agent architect, introduced the multi-pane windows. I believe staff did comment with regards to the window patterning on the sunroom, because it was felt that in the first iteration that the sunroom really didn't tie very well back into the existing house. And when the multi-pane windows came back, which was on the existing sunroom, there was a certain sense that it just sat more comfortably. But I don't believe the committee had specific comments on the windows, except to say perhaps that on that roof, there's a lot of discussion on the rooftop deck entrance, which is that box piece on the deck. There was discussion with regards to those windows and how to lighten that entrance. So the design considerations became windows, the addition of the cornice. There were a few other design ideas that were tossed around at the time as well. Thank you.
Bridget.
That there was a concern about the elevator shaft, if you did something interesting with it, that it would draw attention to that. Now, if it is an interesting design, what is the problem with drawing attention to that?
Sure, subject, through you, Mr. Chair, sure, subject to if there was a design that had been put forward to add features to it, and certainly that was the idea, the comment was relayed to the applicant. There's a lot going on already on this rear addition in terms of its massing, stepping forward and back, and the windows and many entrances. And it was simply the professional opinion that there was a lot of discussion on how to minimize its impact, because it is a sort of tall feature. So that was this was what was proposed, and this was then assessed, but certainly we would have assessed whatever came forward if they wanted to propose making it more of a feature. Thank you.
Zoe.
Can I question just in terms of purpose? I'm a little confused as to why there is an elevator element whatsoever in a building like this. It doesn't really fit the historic attributes of the building itself. Now, if it's a single-family home and somebody is living there and they're elderly or disabled, absolutely. If it's going to be a B&B or something like that, I can also understand, but I don't have any background in terms of purpose.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the single-family home, and the idea is for, without going into too many details, the idea is for the family to allow the parents to age in place there with the rest of the family. So it is to allow essentially a family to stay together and to care for the parents. And so that's why they want to have access to all the floors so that they can be a part of all the different activities day to day. Thank you.
Don?
Yeah, it's very close project, and generally I'm impressed with how it's been carried negotiating the applicants and committee, but I think there are still concerns. Perhaps I'll just comment on a minor concern since it's been mentioned about the multi-pane windows. I can understand multi-pane windows as proposed on the sunroom because it's replacing a sunroom that had multi-pane windows, and so it sort of connects to the sunroom that was there. I'm not sure that copying those windows to the addition, the ground floor and the second floor, is a good idea, but I don't have strong feelings on it. But as far as I'm concerned, going to larger, more modern style windows on the addition proper would be quite acceptable. However, the big problem I think we all recognize is the elevator shaft. This was recognized very early, and I think we hoped that the applicants would be willing to live without access to the top floor, but that seems not to be the case, and so we have this application before us. And I think the committee needs to look at this very carefully because, well, I don't think there's any mention of elevator shafts in the district guidelines. It's too big to be a chimney, it's too small to be an addition. It's just really alien to heritage properties. And we should recognize that many heritage properties in this district are lived in by elderly people, and there's a possibility of seeing elevator shafts popping up everywhere. Would we approve an elevator shaft on Cartwright House, Gildersleeve House, some of the other fine houses on Earl Street, whatever? I think we'd be very reluctant to do so. If they were in the back where they can scarcely be seen, I think the committee would be okay, but that's not the case here. This elevator is very visible from Simcoe Street. It's almost in your face if you look at that diagram. And I know a lot of thought has been given to trying to minimize its impact by changing color, changing texture, and so on, but I don't think that it's really made much difference. So I'm very concerned about the committee approving this application, including the elevator shaft. In my comments, I suggested turning the elevator shaft into a lookout tower. And I really meant a real lookout tower. Many houses of this period, Victorian, early Edwardian, have lookout towers. So it's not adding an alien element to it. And also the owner might, if the elevator cage itself is transparent, they can walk into the elevator and look over the lake. So I think that's a real plus to be thought of carefully. So, but again, it's, people have raised this question, do we want to draw attention to it or try to pretend it's not there or so on? Anyway, for my own benefit, I decided to sketch a possible kind of lookout tower, and I think it's worth considering. Mr. Clerk, can you project this drawing?
I can see if the projector's working enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's hooked up.
Okay.
I'll try.
If not, I can pass it around, but...
It's not even here anymore, so pass it around.
All right, pass it around. But I'd like staff and other people to see it as well. The point is that lookout towers are part of the Kingston fabric, part of the district fabric, and I don't think it's unreasonable to go that route. Now, what we're trying to do is, you get in here into a mixture of the old and the new, and this is neither the one or the other. But we're in a situation where there are no right answers. We have to sort of decide what works best, and carry that over to staff. And, that's the question. So my position is that something needs to be done to that elevator shaft so that to take away the kind of monolithic, flat appearance. Doesn't have to be a lookout. It doesn't have to be this lookout tower. It could be another lookout design tower. Could be some detailing, maybe around the roof, that makes it look a little less blank. But I think we should look at the alternatives. So what I'm going to suggest is, we're bound by procedural things which nobody likes, but those are the rules. I can't introduce an amendment respecting that elevator shaft. But what I would like to do is ask staff if they will add another condition. And that condition, condition 9, would simply read like this: the applicant shall provide further designs that add detailing to the elevator shaft to improve its present monolithic appearance. Now, what that means, if that can be added and if it's approved, then the project could go ahead and people can think again about just how to deal with this elevator shaft. Maybe in the end it won't change, but at least I think we need another round that all of us are involved with. So I'm asking staff if they're willing to change their recommendation. If they don't, then I'm afraid I cannot support this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, while you're thinking there, then Don, could you take the chair a moment for me to make a comment?
Yes, and give me the chair.
My hope, there is going to be a lot of brickwork removed at the back, and I hope that that brickwork will be, the bricks will be kept for possible reuse. This is century-old brick, and it's not easy to replicate. So I would hope that somewhere there is an attempt to keep that brick, if only in the future for repairs or for making further changes to this particular house. Thanks.
Thank you. You return the chair.
Staff is still thinking. Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, staff is struggling with the amendment only in so much as the timing and the fact that our recommendation is progressing to council. And we've not had the benefit of being able to talk about the requested response with the applicant, short of a quick 2-second discussion. So what we would ask is that we're certainly willing to work with the applicant to have them consider design responses to ensure that the elevator shaft is properly distinguished in a way that makes it not stand out. So we can work with the applicant on that within the realm of discretion that we have with the approval that's in front of this committee today. But our recommendation, in our view, has to progress to council as presented, and certainly the comments of the committee members can be appended to the report that goes to council. But the issue of having it somewhat deferred to come back to committee is problematic with the timing and the way that we've arranged for the progression of this file.
Okay, thank you. So in the minutes, that, okay, the comments are there. We cannot amend or defer the motion, so it's a matter of what you have printed on page 73 is what we will be voting on.
I hear what you and Mr. Newman have said. I do not understand why staff cannot change their own recommendation. It hasn't gone to anybody yet. It's come here. And before it goes to council, if they want to change it, they can. Even if we make all kinds of good or bad comments, they can make changes when it goes to council. So don't understand their problem, but that's not my field of expertise.
Okay, no, well, and I think that's maybe oh, you want to comment now?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make sure I understood the comment that you made correctly. So we can consider an amendment to our recommendation to the staff recommendation to council, being that city staff work with the applicant on options to screen or further distinguish or mask the appearance of the elevator shaft. My concern was that the request was that it come back to this committee for further vetting, and that would be problematic from a timing perspective.
I don't think it has to come back to the, if discussions, all these other conditions say that the applicants must provide further designs on this, that, and the other thing, and that goes to heritage staff. I don't think there's any reason why heritage staff can't talk to members of this committee. And if they are prepared to do that, I think we can, in the end, staff can recommend what they want and council can do what they want, but I think we want to do our job, which is trying to improve and protect the heritage attributes of this building and the district. So certainly my intention is that if this condition can be added or something very similar, then it goes to council, council will approve, and then we have a bit more discussion as we are expecting to have about other, about colors and so on and so forth, and detail and bracket designs and so on, all these sorts of things. This can be part of the discussion as well. But I do think that if that happens, staff should involve us in some way, the committee and members in some way.
Okay, so those will be noted in the minutes. You have them. They will be part of the ongoing discussion. Councillor Neil?
Gently, I support the intent of the amendment or the recommendation to staff. The reality is, I also serve on MAC, the Municipal Accessibilities Advisory Committee, and I agree with the mover. We're going to see more and more situations where people want to remain in a heritage building, but also want to be able to make it accessible to themselves and other members of their family. It is in the proposal the most glaring thing that jumps out at you when you look at the rendition, and if there's a way of making it, and what's proposed, I think, does make it less, it doesn't jump out at you as much. It doesn't appear to be as obtrusive as the way it's rendered now. So I would hope that the proponents take that into account and find a way to make it less glaring for what's a beautiful, beautiful building. And I would really hope that they can accomplish that.
Good, thank you. Zoe?
Is there some of achieving a reasonably happy medium here by working with both Don and Jim's points as well as yours, Mr. Chair, in terms of saving the brick that would be removed and perhaps applying it to the elevator shaft? Or I'm not an architect, I don't know if that works materially, but I mean, based on appearances, if it was to be constructed, it may match better.
Do you want on that, Ray?
Hey, Zabak, I'm the architect for this thing. There really isn't that much brick being excised from this building. We've maintained most of the interior brick facades. There's going to be some kind of surgical removals where the elevator doors have to come into the building, but even the garage, I think there's just some, there's a couple of incisions we have to make for a couple of doors, but there's not a lot of brick being taken off the building, so I don't know if we'd be able to do that. I just want to clarify a couple of things about the elevator. What Alex said is absolutely true. This is a family who wants to keep this house in the family. There are two aging relatives who, one may be living here, one would probably be visiting here regularly, that need that elevator immediately. I think fundamentally, you want the elevator to get to all floors of the building. You don't want to have them, restricted to the bottom 2 floors and not be able to go up to the games room or to that upper deck. We have located that elevator in such a way that we don't have to do a lot of surgery to the existing building. It has to be somewhere near the garage, near the front of the house, because that's how you get from the ground level to the main floor of the building. It's through the back side of that elevator. It has to be there, but it is, in my opinion, it's pushed back from the street. It's kind of embedded in the mass of that addition. And my last point is, it's an elevator. It's not an observation tower. It's a shaft with a mobility device inside it. Putting windows in it, even if they were actual windows, I think there would be a problem. You're taking that elevator in a wheelchair, in your bathrobe with your walker. I just think it would be a problem being able to see inside that elevator shaft in the street. So I am, to be quite honest with you, I'm not hopeful that decorating the elevator shaft is going to be an appealing solution here. But we are happy to work with the staff going forward on this. We have done a pre-consultation on this project. I think we've responded to all of the comments that have been made by this committee, the committee before you. We'd just like to move along with this thing. And, I really think simply changing the material on the elevator shaft, the elevator has to have a certain height to the shaft. There's an overrun requirement for maintenance. We can't make it any lower than that. I just think this is the solution we want to settle on.
Thank you. Comments, Matthew? You haven't spoken yet.
So, I think, contextually speaking, if you look at it, I think in the report it talks about, this house has been in the family for a good time. And you think about this asset, there's not that many, large, privately held buildings like that, of that status. And so you think, it's been maintained, dutifully, in keeping a lot of its original assets, including its windows, which is not something we see a lot of. So if we have to pay the small price that is allowing these people to stay in their house with an elevator shaft, it's hard for me to, I think with good detailing, like painting or whatever ends up happening to the exterior of the elevator shaft, it's hard for me to put up a barrier, because I think this is pretty sensitive and sympathetic to the rest of the building. Even all the details seem covered. So I think it's really hard to pump the brakes on it when you think about what these people want to do with their space. And as far as making it into a lookout, it's an idea. But I think, right now, it just is what it is. It's an elevator. It's not lying. About putting a Belvedere lookout in there might try and turn it into something it's not. Which is kind of the argument you were saying with the windows on the veranda, is that, you're presenting it as something it's not. But I think this does a good job. It's a good little infill project. You even keep the accessory building with minimal intervention, on the brickwork. The fact that there's going to be, so few new openings that there's not even enough brick to clad the elevator, I think is a great sign. This asset's going to hopefully get maintained and used in its intended function for at least another generation. So that satisfies me. And if I have to deal with the elevator, so be it. Thanks.
Good, thank you. Last comments, Jennifer?
I guess I agree with Don on this. I think that more attention should be paid to the elevator shaft, that it isn't something we should just gloss over. I think that his idea of it making it be a glass elevator is interesting. You can always frost the outside, have some sort of non-transparent glass. Even possibly how you've addressed the massing in the addition, having that step back or what looks like a step back at the very top could possibly reduce the mass, and further detailing it possibly as well. I like the idea of it getting further iterations. I don't necessarily need to be involved in that, but if planning was, I think that would be awesome. Yeah.
I think it's also that, correct me if I'm wrong, the elevator seems to exist on the exterior of the existing footprint of the building. So like the reversibility of this project, if we're really concerned about the actual cultural asset, which is the building, and the accessory building, which I think is like also equally important, it's really minimal intervention, and there's the reversibility aspect to it. And as far as the runaway of, I think it's worth noting, the runaway of providing access to heritage assets. Elevators are like a pretty considerable expense, because it's not just the elevator, there's also the maintenance contract that goes with it. So I don't see that turning into a big problem. And so, like I said, for me, I think it's easy to say this elevator, to pick it out, it's there, but it could be drowned out with the proper cladding. And so I think it's a small price to pay.
Okay, thank you. Comments? Think we've won.
I think we've all sort of recognized that there's no right answer. This is one of those difficult things that unfortunately the committee has to deal with, and the committee needs to deal with. I guess I just want to repeat that although I think the suggestion of a lookout tower should be taken seriously, I can understand if there are reasons why that really can't work. If that can't work, I think it's still important to do something to that shaft in terms of detailing, maybe some trim around the top of it, maybe some corner joints where the shingles can meet up against, just to put a bit of structure to it so that it's not simply a blank slab. So I think I understood staff to say that they were willing to leave an opening for further discussion about detailing of the elevator shaft. And if that's the case, I'm willing to vote for it. If not, if they say they're not going to do anything, then I won't vote for it.
Okay, the mover and the seconder. The motion is simply that Heritage Kingston supports Council's approval of the following, that being page 73. Do I have a mover? Councillor Doherty, a seconder. Matthew, thank you. The motion cannot be amended or deferred. It's a yes or no vote. Those in favour? Those opposed? That is carried. We go on, I believe, to Battersea Road, page 113. Now, this is the first time I've looked after a heritage easement agreement, and my understanding is that we deal with it in the same way as a Part 4 proposal. Oh, Ryan, well, welcome. This is
good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is an application that's not as common as many that this committee will see. This is an application to review a heritage easement agreement that the city and the owner is agreeing to enter into to conserve a heritage resource out on Battersea and Unity Road. So the property is 2285 Battersea Road. It's at the northwest corner of Battersea and Unity Road. It includes a circa 1860s limestone farm dwelling, known as the James Hickey House, as well as a number of outbuildings. This is the James Hickey House. I understand from the research that the double gable is actually fairly unusual for a rural stone farmhouse of this era, so it's kind of an interesting property. It was reviewed in 2015 as part of a larger project the city did to look at a number of resources that were unresearched in the rural area particularly. And it was reviewed by our working group, presented to council with a recommendation to designate. Council, as an initial step, has listed a lot of properties in that group, including the one before you. So it is a non-designated property that's currently listed on a register. The ultimate recommendation, though, however, was to designate it as it merits conservation. The owners of the property have engaged the city to present their plans for a future development of the site, where they propose a hotel and spa on the property. The proposal requires various Planning Act applications, official plan amendments, zoning amendments, site plan control, and the like, which have not yet been submitted. Work has commenced on the site under the current zoning permissions. And so today we are looking at a heritage easement agreement to conserve the cultural heritage value of this property, including this house, as well as the barn has some contribution to the heritage rural nature of the property, and this stone gate post, as well as some of these mature trees that you see aligning the property, and particularly the front entrance. So the intent of the easement agreement is to ensure that the 1860 stone dwelling is restored, conserved, and adaptively reused in accordance with conservation best practices. The draft agreement is in the agenda package, which is the key document that we're looking at today that this committee is to be consulted on prior to going to council for endorsement and approval. It provides an outline of the cultural heritage attributes of this property, which I have here before you. Exhibit, I believe it's Schedule B of the draft agreement, includes a list of heritage attributes and a statement of cultural heritage value. I've sort of paraphrased some of that in the slide before you. The property has associative value with some of the early development in the rural area of Kingston, as well as the historic intersection of the toll road, Battersea Road at Unity. The James Hickey was the toll collector at the early part of the 19th century. This was his house. The toll house for this property was closer to the intersection. The Hickey family owned this property for most of a century and farmed the lands, and it's also part of conserving the rural character of this part of the city. The attributes are listed before you. They are also in that schedule I mentioned, including the stone building primarily, its veranda, chimneys, fenestration pattern, as well as some of the mature trees and the stone gate posts. So while consideration of impacts to listed properties is required in the city's official plan when you're looking at planning applications, specific approvals for alterations to listed properties is not required. So this is our opportunity to review the changes proposed to the stone building and ensure that it meets best practices and conserves the heritage value of this property adequately. The agreement will act as our conservation mechanism for the subject property in lieu of a Part 4 designation. However, it is built into the agreement that future alterations, such as new signage, for example, demolitions or changes that are not anticipated currently, would be required to follow that Part 4, essentially, process for approvals. The staff note that the agreement is not intended to address the design, location, materiality of the new buildings on the site. Those matters related to the new buildings are to be assessed by staff under a future site plan control application and agreement. The concept plans that are in your agenda package and before you here today are the current versions that we've seen of the new building. However, these designs may be subject to change, and I'm referring specifically to the additions. The ones that are happening to the Hickey House itself are to be reviewed and formalized today or when council approves the agreement. But the larger project may be subject to minor changes. The intent is that this agreement will work in tandem with the site plan control agreement, so they will deal with two separate items, but will work together on the property and both be registered against this property. The most significant attributes of the Hickey House, of course, is the farmhouse itself, its shape, profile, the limestone walls and the openings. I would note that the shape and profile, the original footprint, and the 1.5-story gabled roof profile, it will remain unchanged and will be restored and incorporated into the new design. All the windows on this building have been replaced over time with vinyl windows, aluminum-clad surrounds. They are to be replaced with more period-appropriate windows, sash windows, and appropriate pattern that fit within the existing openings and that comply with the city's window policy. The limestone walls, similarly, are to, as needed, will be restored and repaired and showcased as part of the character of this development and in accordance with the city's masonry policy. Staff have recommended to the owner that a location be reserved for an easily visible and an accessible place for a bit of an interpretive installation to sort of showcase the history of this area, in particular this property, for those visiting and using the site. As part of the overall redevelopment of the subject property, the owners wish to also remove the barn, which I had a picture of back here. This, as some of the committee members may know, came before this group as an application for notice of intent to demolish the building. It has been assessed structurally and from a heritage conservation perspective. While the structure itself reflects the rural character and development of this area, on its own, it is not of heritage value, and therefore a well-designed new building would contribute to the rural character of this area in much the same fashion as this building does. The applicant's intention is to disassemble this building, reuse as much of the existing material as possible on the site, and to reconstruct a similarly shaped and a barn in a similar location to help reflect that and continue that rural character of this area and this property. And that has been included, I should note, under Schedule C of the draft agreement is the list of the changes to the heritage attributes that are being, in lack of a better term, sort of pre-approved under this agreement to allow the applicant to move forward. And I believe I have those listed here. So as I mentioned, these are the windows that are being restored, one of the concrete chimneys that was a later addition is being removed. There's also some future works that we've flagged, some of them in response to comments from this group, as well as staff, and that includes some of the restoration to the sort of inappropriate iron or metal railings along the veranda, as well as the soffits, which some of the members noted in certain areas were still visible and original. Some were covered with aluminum, so the owner has agreed to look into that in the future to perhaps restore and uncover those wooden soffits and details. So this again is just a paraphrased list that is more wholly in your agenda package. The Hickey House will continue to have a prominent prominent presence at this historic intersection. The new additions are to be located to the rear and side, away from the prominent south and east facades or elevations of this original house. While the comments Through comments from staff and this committee, the applicants have responded in adjusting the design and with thoughtful and clever design solutions. Heritage staff are of the opinion that the proposal as modified will uphold the heritage conservation objectives set out in the official plan, as well as provincial and federal best practices and guidelines. We circulated this application. There is a number of work yet to be done from the approval perspective on this property, building permits, licensing approvals, as well as Planning Act approvals, as I mentioned. So they've been added as conditions or as the applicant is aware of that, and they will be sought at a future date. This terms of comments from this committee, it was circulated, this application was circulated through DASH. There was also pre-application done in November for this application, and 2 site visits were organized, held on this property. So any comments that we received have been provided to the applicants, and they have considered them and have made changes. And it is our recommendation, Mr. Chair, that that council approve and enact the bylaw to enter into a heritage easement agreement with the owners to help conserve this valued rural asset. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. Questions, comments from the committee? Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Very quickly, Councillor Doherty and I were able to go to the site and look at the upcoming commitment that's being made. I just had a question first to heritage staff. I know that we increasingly are doing easement agreements with proponents. Does that easement agreement, in your opinion, give the same level of heritage protection that we would get through the usual process of protection?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, I would say yes, it does, if not better. The easement or the agreement that's before you includes a full statement of significance, which would make up the majority of a designating bylaw. We've also built in clause in the agreement that changes that aren't anticipated at this point in the future are still subject to the same process that a Part 4 designation would be. So no, I think in this and before. And it's registered on title, same as a designation bylaw would be. So I don't think we're losing anything by doing an easement agreement. The benefit to the owner is that we're able to understand their timing and their proposals at this point and approve everything as a package, as opposed to having to come back for various permits in the future. But no, I don't think we're losing anything. I think this is an excellent tool that if you have the right applicant, the right owner, and the right project, it works really well.
And my last question, maybe something for Mr. Newman to address. As the chair of Planning Committee, when we have a public meeting on this site, we'll already, as I understand it, have an easement agreement. Would the public still have an opportunity to make a comment about a heritage aspect of the development? Our hands aren't tied at that public meeting that, no, there's an easement, we can't talk about that. If you could address that.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. What's before you today are the proposed alterations to the stone dwelling. So the easement agreement is going, it acknowledges those specific alterations to the heritage home. The future bigger picture plans for the property that will go to a future planning committee meeting will also be, as Mr. Leary mentioned, subject to a subsequent heritage review. So members of the public will have an opportunity both at planning committee and potentially at a future Heritage Kingston meeting to comment on those pieces.
Thank you.
I liked in your face. Other questions, comments? Seeing none, then the motion will be to as on page 114, that council approve the bylaw to enact a heritage easement agreement, etc. Exhibit C is page 133 to 146, so it's quite comprehensive when you've got the whole thing there. So do I have a mover? Councillor Neal, seconder. Don Taylor. Further discussion? Yes, Don.
Maybe I could add a word issue of easement agreements versus designation. I think it's the right process in this case. I think it works well where there's a heritage building, but there's a large development around it. And it's just clumsy to deal with that through designation, because designation is supposed to apply to the whole property. Easement agreement has a disadvantage in that the committee doesn't see as much detail in the design that relates to the heritage attributes. And I'd like to raise a couple of suggestions there. As far as we're concerned, this Exhibit C, or rather Schedule C, on page 146, has the things that we really should care about. And, you know, it says a lot of good things, and I'm sure good things will be done, but we don't see the specific details. And I'm a little concerned that one or two of them are a little more vague than they should be. Number 9 says the removal and replanting of trees on the property. Well, that could cover anything. Removing them all or covering the whole property with trees. And this is a matter that was discussed in pre-consultation and so on. And I think it's important that one of the purposes of designating properties and protecting heritage properties is for the benefit of the public, not just the owners, so that I don't think we should want to see a situation where this property is so surrounded by trees that the public can never see it. So I would like to introduce some different words to number 9, just very minor ones. I don't think anybody should object. And this will be an amendment to change condition 9 to read the removal and replanting of trees on the property, taking into consideration public views from both Battersea and Unity Roads. So again, you can, I've got another one there too.
Thank you. Is there for that? Jane? Yeah, just ask, Ryan, you did the presentation, didn't you? Assuming that this passes and the easement is in place, does the owner still have to come back here for any changes, or does this give them carte blanche to go ahead with anything mentioned in here?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The intention is any of the works noted in Schedule C are being approved today. So the owner does not have to come back for those specific alterations. I would note in terms of the trees and landscaping, details of the landscaping plan have not been addressed. That will be something that will be covered as part of the site plan control application, which heritage staff will be providing input into. I don't think we object to the additional wording. That will be certainly something we will be looking into when we do our analysis of it. So,
okay, thank you. Other comments, questions? The amendment then adds on to, on page 146 of Exhibit C, of Schedule C, the replanting of trees on the property, taking into consideration views from Battersea and Unity Road. Those in favour of the amendment? Those opposed to the amendment? That is carried then. So the amended motion, page 114 plus the amended Exhibit and Schedule C done.
And I'd like to minor change to number 10 as well. Again, this refers to rebuilding the frame barn. It says similar design, size, location. That, again, is rather vague. I'm sure we don't expect the owners are going to give us a vinyl siding barn, but I think it is important that the cladding be appropriate and, if possible, the same as the existing barn. So I'd like to suggest an amendment to number 10 so that it reads, the removal, salvage for reuse on the property, and reconstruction of the frame barn with similar design, size, cladding, and location.
Seconder for that amendment. Jane, thank you. Discussion? I think you've made your point that you want to be more specific on it. Matthew?
Just commenting on the fact that from what Ryan was saying, where this, because it sounds like the structure of the easement, that moving forward, these are just sort of like conditions for them to work within. So the removal part of the structure sounds like a big sort of, okay, well, then it's just, it's gone. Although we kept the materials, it's gone. And so I just like, is there any sort of like provision for like an inventory of the building before it becomes removed? Just to work with the function that they're trying to work towards with the property, to take that into consideration. And at least there's like an inventory of what was there.
Any inventory, Ryan, on the buildings at all?
Mr. Chair, other than an extensive series of pictures we have on file, we don't have any detailed drawings, if that's what the member's looking for. I don't have any objection to that myself. But.
So yeah, the photographs are there, but that's as far as we are at present.
Yeah, the reason I was asking was that, once it's gone, it's gone. And so if this is the moment for intervention where you can at least do something, maybe there's just a take a inventory of the space before you tear it down.
Okay, so that's duly noted, I think. Yep, thank you. Other comments on, we haven't voted on that amendment yet, have we? So we have the amendment that we add cladding and location be included there. Those in favor of that amendment to number 10? Those opposed? That is carried then. So we have a doubly amended schedule attached to the main motion. Any further amendments? If not, then I go back to the original motion, which is on page 114, that Heritage Kingston recommend. You have the two paragraphs there, and the as per Exhibit C includes two amendments on our page 146. It's been moved, seconded. Councillor Neal.
Another quick question that just mind for Heritage staff. I know when we had the tour of the building, there were some, they're definitely going to be utilizing the inside of the building. And I know that typically we focus more on the externals in heritage preservation. Are you confident that that there'll be a continuing dialogue for some of the purposes? Because there's a lot of really interesting aspects to the internal as well. So do you feel you'll have an opportunity with a nudge and a wink to get some recognition for some of those attributes internally as well? And will those be reflected in the easement, or will they be a continuing dialogue you'll have with the proponent?
Mr. Chief, it'll be the latter. The easement agreement as it's drafted is specifically exterior features, so there's no interior features. It was not noted by either of the heritage consulting firms that reviewed this property, so we haven't included any. Saying that, given some of the work I've seen this company do for, say, the church on Queen Street, they do like to showcase some of the interior features and some of the historical interesting things that you find in those old buildings in their design of their new build. So I have faith that that will be done, but no, that is not something that is being captured specifically in this agreement.
Thank you.
Further questions? Jane?
I've seen it somewhere, but I think there are often conditions put in on Part 4 properties if there's some sort of demolition, that it's recorded and photographed, and you know, there's a detailed record of the demolition and you know, historical photos, so that you have some record of the thing that's being destroyed. So I'm sort of following up to what Matthew said, I think, and suggesting that perhaps when the demolition of this barn comes about, it should be recorded with photographs.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've confirmed with the applicant, Ben Pelon here, that he's happy to have City Heritage staff on site during the demolition of the barn so we can document, take photos, identify the pieces as they're deconstructed.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, then voting on the amended recommendation. Those in favour? Those opposed? That then is carried. We go on to page 150, 62 Baden Street. This is a pre-consultation. Who's going to introduce this one? Oh, there you are. Do you just want to remind people what a pre-consultation means?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I circulated an email about this yesterday, but I will reiterate it here just for the benefit of new members and members of the public. So the purpose of a pre-consultation in terms of heritage, we typically recommend them where there's might be increased public interest in the project, or there's a lot of moving pieces and it's maybe a little bit more complicated. So it really serves as an opportunity for staff and for committee members to offer preliminary feedback on the concept plan of the applicant before they actually make any formal applications under the Act. So there's no recommendation put in front of you by staff for this pre-consultation, and the committee's not expected to be making any sort of decisions today. It's just kind of an opportunity for the applicant to present their concept to you. They'll do probably about a 10-minute slideshow here with some details about their application and what they're proposing, and then the committee will have an opportunity to comment and ask questions as you see fit. So I'm just going to try and set up the presentation by the applicant here. So give me a second to figure out this computer. I think I have to. I'm assuming this one. This is yours. So, I want to go. Okay, so this pre-consultation submission is for the proposed redevelopment of 5 lots on the southeast corner of McDonald Avenue and Baden Street. So this is actually across the road from the earlier property you heard about on Baden Street. So the lots were originally formed part of the Church of the Good Thief property, but in 2016 they underwent planning applications to create new lots and went through a zoning bylaw amendment at this time for these properties. So the reference property at 62 Baden Street, which is the subject of this pre-consultation, is the civic address that's actually associated with the parish hall building. The entire church and presbytery property there was designated under Part 4 of the Act in 1978. And so the applicant has requested a consultation meeting with the committee today in regards to a proposal to demolish the parish hall structure at 62 Baden Street and to redevelop the subject lots at the rear of the property along Baden Street with 2 3-story, 6-unit residential structures. I think the applicant is also going to speak today. They also own the presbytery, so staff has suggested that they bring forward their plans here just so that the committee has a picture of the whole proposal. So the applicant is seeking comments from Heritage Kingston to further inform the development concept for any future applications under the Ontario Heritage Act, as I mentioned, and these plans will also require a number of approvals under the Planning Act as well for your information. So I'll pass it along to Mark here. So he's the planning consultant, and we also have the architect and the property owner here for your information.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to make a presentation to you today about this site. We are working very closely with the Archdiocese of Kingston, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese, who are implementing an archives in the former Church of the Good Thief. And we have developed a close relationship over time. And the product that you're going to see here today is indicative of that fruitful relationship and conversation about what would work in infill on this site. I also like to thank staff for their excellent support in identifying issues that would be of concern to this committee today. There's also members of the Archdiocese Archives Committee here in support of this application. So to move it forward, yeah. Just, okay, there we go, thank you. So just to orient you, everyone, this 1-acre site is located at McDonald Avenue and Baden Street in Portsmouth. Formerly, this land was owned by the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Kingston and was purchased in the fall of 2018, and it is hoped that construction could begin in summer of 2019. Just to introduce the owner, the proposal is by the new owner, Zalco Construction, which is located in Toronto. Zalco develops property in both Canada and the United States, particularly in Baltimore and Toronto. And Zalco builds high-quality rental units with great attention to detail. And just a quick example here of some of their projects in Canada and the United States. You can see the quality finishes in both the interior and exterior, and we hope to bring the same level of quality to 473 King Street West and 62 Baden Street. So our vision, this 3D concept shows the project components working together on this site. The proposed archives project will start with the exterior restoration of the church, and I believe they're starting to consider that for this May in 2019. This exterior work will require a large construction zone and scaffolding. Therefore, we're requesting that the parish hall be demolished by May to facilitate the start of the archives project. Meanwhile, it's proposed that the interior of the rectory be demolished in preparation for the creation of 4 apartments in early March. We would coordinate with the Archdiocese and the Benton Group around trades and scaffolding for the exterior renovation of the rectory later in the summer. And once work on the former church is progressing well, the basement excavation work for the new residential buildings would start, and modular units would be brought to the site and placed on the foundations, and exterior finished work would continue to completion. Just to give you a better idea, so here's a quick aerial view of the site. So what we're proposing is the new construction at the rear of the property and the restoration of the rectory. So our proposal is to create 16 rental apartments located in 3 buildings, which would form a precinct around the proposed archives. Parking would be located in the center of the site, accessed by an internal drive aisle. As you can see, lots 3 and 4 and lots 5 and 6 are merged to allow for the creation of the new buildings. And these buildings would be architecturally compatible to the former church. Land ownership and site management would be coordinated by Zalco and the Archdiocese. Zalco is committed to the preservation of the rectory and its conversion to 4 luxury apartments. The rectory is in need of significant repair to the exterior. Many of the features, such as the slate roof, brick pointing, wood eaves, and windows, are all at the end of their serviceable lifespan and need to be renovated and updated. Andre Scheinman estimated the cost at approximately $500,000 for the exterior work, and our estimates for the interior conversion are at about $1.38 million. This proposal puts all available rehabilitation funds towards the rectory, which we deem the more significant building, and Todd Colburn and staff from Colburn Campbell Architects here in Kingston will oversee the rehabilitation. So just an example here of working with the existing floor plan to create the 4 apartments in the rectory. We believe they can be successfully created. The interior has been altered over the years and many original features have been replaced. Therefore, the entire interior will need to be renovated to meet code and fire requirements. Any heritage features that can be salvaged will be incorporated into the final project design. And as seen here on the earlier slide, Zalco is committed to creating a high-quality development here. However, the former parish hall cannot be successfully renovated, and we request permission to demolish it. Originally built as a stable, the building has little original character remaining from its conversion to the parish hall in 1988. The building does not meet current building code requirements. The building at 1,500 square feet is too small to be rehabilitated into a multi-residential building. The stonework has been damaged by the Portland cement that has been used to repoint it, and many stones are not original, and most of the stones would likely fracture if disassembled. After careful deliberation, it was determined that the cost of over $600,000 and the difficulty to address these building code deficiencies make it impossible to retain this building. This proposal will introduce new and much-needed rental apartments to the site in an architecturally respectful manner. The rectory and 2 low-rise buildings will be designed to integrate with the new archives in the former church. Each 6-plex is composed of 2 triplex buildings linked by a glassed-in stairwell. Each 6-plex is about 700 square feet larger than the combined footprint of the former parish hall and adjacent garage. Using the rectory for design inspiration, the new buildings will be clad entirely in red brick with stone foundations. The stairwell will be recessed slightly and the entrance canopy added for depth and articulation of the facade. The building will become a backdrop to the former church and rectory buildings. As seen in this example, the design of each triplex references the rectory in terms of height, width, color, and materials, albeit in a transitional style, meaning it's neither modern nor traditional. The new architecture will blend in and defer to the heritage buildings. As seen here, the historic and new architecture are the same height. The current zoning permits a height of 35 feet. Height of the roofline of the rectory is 36 feet or 10.9 meters, and the top of the front end gable of the new construction is about 38.3 feet or 11.7 meters. The addition of 60 new apartments into this great location will add much needed rental housing to the Kingston community. The site is well serviced by transit and is near major employment centers. The apartments are generously sized at 900 square feet with a storage space available for tenants in the basement, which we feel is an added benefit for tenants. Each unit will have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, 5 new appliances, in-suite laundry, heated floors, on-site parking, and many more features that would attract good tenants. These units are geared to 1- and 2-person households. The stairwell will be fire rated, and 1 ground floor unit will be barrier-free to fulfill those requirements. So this is a view of the project from McDonald Avenue, looking and showing the relationship between the rectory and the new construction. And, we are flexible around materials. We have, in this iteration, offered red brick, which we can match to the color of the rectory. Alternatively, we had considered using a light gray brick that would match more to the church, but we felt that this red brick actually is a little warmer and a little more friendly. The view from the interior of the site looking out from the archives parking area. So this is what staff at the archives and visitors would encounter when they exit the building. So a precinct is created, parking is concentrated here. There would be an emphasis on appropriate landscaping to make it as attractive for the residents and for visitors to the archives as possible. We have some unresolved material issues, obviously. The gable end, we have not revised or devised a solution to that just yet. We haven't settled it completely on roof material. There's a lot of elements that we would want to work with staff on and with the committee to ensure conformity to the historic buildings. This is another aerial view of the site highlighting the arrangement of the buildings forming the precinct with parking in the interior and open landscaping. One of the things that we, and I think the archives group, realized when we looked at the layout for the single-family detached residences that there would be 5 lots created, and that public access and amenity would be lost if these were subdivided into private lots. So in this scenario, we feel there's a tremendous benefit to the community around access to the site. We're going to try to retain as much of the open park-like feel as possible for the benefit of residents and visitors to the archives. So just to quickly summarize, this proposal brings many benefits to the Portsmouth community. The Archdiocese Archives is an important new heritage facility in our community. The archives will have only one neighboring property owner to coordinate construction and ongoing property maintenance. Potentially as much as $8 million will be invested in the 2 heritage buildings on the site and at no cost to the City of Kingston. The new development will see the creation of 16 much needed new rental apartments added to the housing stock and contribute to municipal revenues through fees and permits as well as long-term to the tax base. The new high-quality development is designed to coordinate with and defer to the historic architecture. The existing open landscape will be retained and remain a community benefit rather than being subdivided into individual lots. This proposal requires a zoning amendment and heritage approvals, and it is our hope that Heritage Kingston and the community will see the many benefits of this proposal and support it. So we're prepared to answer any questions, certainly around the heritage planning side. We have our architect, Greg Latimer, here, as well as the owner.
Thank you very much. Go around with questions. Matthew.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for your presentation. It's great. Do you mind putting up the sort of like concept drawing where it's in plan sort of for the site?
Yeah.
Oh, you can go back. Sorry, it's not a drawing.
That one?
Yeah. No, sorry, go back.
There was one more. Yep.
There you go. That one.
Yep.
That one's
Yep.
perfect. Okay, so I think, it seems like a heritage conservation district, and it serves the function of that property the way that all the buildings are oriented, because they're oriented inward towards your precinct, as I think you're referring to it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really serve the other portion of the population because it really cuts them off because the street wall is cold,
Yeah.
And so you could flip the orientation, although it doesn't serve your function of providing access to the precinct. It would be a lot better, I think. This is the zoning stuff, but just
Yep.
suggestion. It would serve the character and function of the neighborhood much better, as well as pushing the westerly building, so the one that's on the left north, to meet the street wall orientation of the other building. I think it would just present way better to the, because I'm assuming, with the double peak roofs, you did that to try to mimic.
Yeah, the front end gable, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it looks great. But I think those sorts of things say a lot, because, like, right now, that really, to me, says, oh, people don't go here, cars go here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
Which
we
is,
tried to do to address exactly that concern
Yeah.
is that you'll notice the elevations for the buildings are exactly the same. So the side that's facing into the archives precinct
yeah.
and the face to Baden Street or McDonald Street are the same.
Okay, great.
So they're exactly finished the same way. So there's no back facing to the street.
Yeah.
And we certainly could consider pulling in that western edge, as per zoning requirements, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that would really serve the neighborhood and the buildings better.
Sure.
Because, like, is there a vestibule on the other side of the building, on the street side? Like, you have your portico thing.
We felt that this layout seems to work the best.
Yeah.
For all concerned. We are staying away from the property owner immediately to the east, so they're given more space with the driveway and maintenance of vegetation on
Yeah.
that side. There's just so many variables, we're trying to address, but, I think these are all good points, and we'll try
Yeah.
to consider them.
I just, like, you want to manage the permeability of those huge walls, because they'll become dead zones, essentially, to the street, right? And, like, not everybody's in a car, and so it's like you're eating up a considerable amount of the block as a,
Yeah.
and
So
it's
you're
not
saying that edge towards Baden and McDonald,
yeah.
bring it more to the building lot line.
Yeah, so that building that's, like, nearest to us, like,
Yep.
just north of the rectory,
Mhm.
push that one north to
Yeah.
meet the street wall that's established by the other buildings on the street, and then also, like, increase the presence of the buildings on the street side, not to the courtyard.
Yeah.
And I think that would serve the whole space a lot better, rather than getting the backside of all the buildings, Anyways, yeah, other than that, I think it's great.
I would just, if we need to go more detail, I can always defer to our architect.
Yeah.
I mean, there's obviously constraints, but we've tried to address that main concern that we're not turning our back on the street. We
Yeah.
have tried to do that.
Cool, thank you.
Like most city councilors, I wear several hats, and one of them is chair of planning committee. And I will say I was on the brink a couple of times of saying point of order, because so much of what you presented is planning related and not heritage related. And I appreciate that you're making a request for something that we hardly ever hear, which is a request to demolish a heritage designated building. So my first question is, when will this be coming to planning committee?
Yes.
If you could answer that, that would be helpful.
We would like to come to planning committee as soon as possible. We wanted to make sure that this committee was satisfied with what we were proposing from a design and implementation perspective. So that was our first intent. We had met with staff a number of times. They've given us excellent feedback. Obviously, as you know, many of these are planning elements that we need to consider, but we felt that overall, the heritage component was primary at this juncture, as well as getting community feedback.
Because I have ruled questions out of order when they've been purely heritage-related questions at planning.
Yeah.
And so I would really appreciate this coming to planning as soon as possible, because so much of what you're presenting, I'm hearing for the first time, and they are clearly planning-related
Obviously, yes.
issues.
Yes.
So
I agree.
I'm going to ask staff if I could. Like I just said, it's so seldom that we get, in my experience, that we get a request for demolition of a heritage building. And obviously, we need that to be put into the context of what development proposals and how respectful those proposals will be to the heritage aspects. So I didn't jump in with a point of order, although I was tempted to. I guess, one, can you explain to me this process of seeking a demolition of a heritage designated property? And if you could answer, is this heritage designation usually goes with both the building and the property? If you could address my concerns about those aspects of it.
Mr. Chair, so just to be clear, the designation goes with the property. In this case, 5 properties, because it still covers the entire holding, or what was the original church holding. And then of those, you identify the attributes, and that includes the buildings in all cases, in most cases, if they have heritage value. What's before this committee today is kind of an interesting opportunity to flag these concerns for the applicant's benefit. So when they come back for their demo permit and their permit for their their heritage demo permit and their heritage permit for the new builds, they can address these things before they come back. So granted, part of what is proposed before you, or what is being considered, is the removal of a stone former stable building on Baden Street. Demolition of heritage buildings is thankfully fairly rare, but when that happens, we look for the applicant to make a case for it. So to put forward their assessment of the building, its heritage value as it stands today, and how it contributes to the area and the property. In some cases, an engineering or a structural assessment of the building to say, can it be salvaged, and if so, what is the implications of that to both to the resource itself and to how that impacts the cost analysis of the rest of the development, because that is a consideration in many cases. So we will look at what's best for this resource and for the community. So at this point, we're not there yet. At this point, this committee has a chance to voice those concerns and say, we're interested in this, we'd like to come out and see it, or can you focus on these aspects of your analysis when you bring back our heritage demo permit application, because that's what we're going to be looking for. But I think, as the presenter mentioned, they have a lot going on this property, and they're kind of looking for feedback on the whole project. Demo being part of it, yes, definitely a big part of it, but also the character of these buildings. Is there things that they should be focusing on or avoiding or changing? Is there something inherently wrong with where they're placing these, or the scale of these, or all of that in relation to the heritage impact of the property, its resources, and in the village, Portsmouth Village character area, which we flagged as a future district. So all of that in mind, this is an opportunity, a really informal opportunity to provide those feedback and those comments to the applicant and his team, who are all here, so that when they come back in the future for their heritage permits, that you can have a complete package and have missed anything. So, provide what you can today. If there's something that comes up after the meeting's over, email Janice, I believe she's the planner on file for this one, and we'll certainly provide that to the proponents. Hope that answers your questions.
Done.
I have a couple. First of all, of course, the Heritage Committee doesn't like to see the demolition of a stone building, but we recognize that it's not a wonderful building. That being said, we would balance the loss of some heritage quality with gains elsewhere, in particular the gain in renovation of the rectory or presbytery. And certainly I'm pleased to hear what you said about plans to renovate the rectory building. But I'm wondering that whether in fact this project may benefit from a heritage easement agreement, in that such agreement would force you to renovate the presbytery building, whereas simply it being designated doesn't mean you have to do anything. You can just let it deteriorate, designated or not. But I think we'd feel badly if we allowed you to demolish the parish hall and did nothing to the rectory. So possibly a heritage easement agreement is a way to go, but that's for staff to deal with. One specific question, though, looking at the layout, the site plan, it looks as if, well, there's a driveway going around providing access to the rear of the church building. Is that a recognized right-of-way, or could that be negotiated? Because if it's fixed in stone, then you really don't have much flexibility for these buildings. I mean, for instance, you might consider, instead of having two separate buildings, having an L-shaped building or something like that. So what's the status of those driveways?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is what the church archives preferred, is a double access point. Parking for the residential is immediately adjacent to their parking, right in front of the former church. And our engineering department has no concerns. It would be a private road, and it would be basically a shared ownership with the Archdiocese. So there's no concerns around traffic movement. Actually, they would prefer this, yeah.
There is a concern in my mind that it really means the possibilities of the site. And I mentioned a single L-shaped building would allow more sort of ambience that might pick up from the church and the rectory building. So anyway, that's a thought that is in my mind. I really think that this, as you say, this is a very attractive site. It's away from traffic and noise and so on, and I think you should be looking at something special on the site, and something that relates to the church and to the building. So those are things.
Just in quick response to your question, I mean, it would be so much easier for us to build a 6-story building right at the corner. It'd be so much easier. What we're doing is much more difficult, much more costly in order to fit in. So I think I want to emphasize that. And you don't have to twist our arms to preserve the rectory. We want to preserve the rectory. We'll get maximum rents there because we'll be giving it luxury finishes. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Bridget?
Thank you. I really like the improvements and the materials that you use from the other drawings that I've previously seen. So there's the red brick and the stone trying to match the rectory is a much better look. I still have a concern. I feel like the neighborhood is going to be concerned about the massing. And I noticed you don't have the drawings up, but of the internal architecture layout.
Yes. Sorry, I don't have that.
Yeah, the one that I looked, I don't know if you changed the internal, because it looked like there was space in the basement, and I wonder if that could be utilized to reduce the height or somehow the masses. They seem large, and I don't know if it's because they're attached, or is it a height thing? It's the massing that I'm questioning.
Yeah, well, we've heard that. There's a number of factors, one around just ease of cost with the stairwell. The stairwell also has value in that it is a transparent feature, which kind of defines the two triplex buildings. It's transparent, it's naturally lit, and there's natural surveillance for safety. So those are all aspects that we brought into consideration. The Archdiocese does not want basement units. We don't want basement units. We would love to give the tenants, full access to light and air as much as possible. So that is what our thinking is. As I mentioned about the height, I can go back to that slide for you. There it is. Oops. So the height is the same, essentially. I mean, I think we're talking about a foot, really, between what is permitted and what's proposed. The height of the rectory is 36, so it exceeds the current zoning. So we're staying well within that, realm of height. So now we were focusing on materials to fit in and quality for the tenants. I think that's, for us, that's essential. So we did consult with the Archdiocese. They would prefer not to have basement units, like facing their archives entrance. And we heard that, and we respect that.
Zoe.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to first speak to similarly the same point that Councillor Doherty did in terms of the large scale size of these complexes. For the community's perspective here, these are two absolutely beautiful buildings that you're now covering up from the view of those who live across the street, live around the corner. They're not going to be able to see the backsides or any of the details of these buildings because these new complexes are going to be smack in front of them. There is somewhat of a path down the middle, but that specifically goes in between these two buildings so that the majority of the buildings from the view of the neighboring houses is completely obstructed. And the size of them doesn't allow you to see over top to get any of the details of them either. So I mean, have you thought about lowering the height of them instead of doing 3 tall, maybe doing just 2 to get more of that detail of the buildings?
Just on a couple of points, that to your point, our main driver was to preserve corridors, the heritage view corridors up King Street to Baton. So the buildings, just go back, are behind the rectory and the church. So those view corridors are preserved up King Street, and that seemed to be what we had heard was more valuable. Another point was, with the current site plan, we were going to lose all public access because everything would be chopped up into individual lots. So houses would be going up, there would be a loss of views regardless. And those buildings can go up to 10.5 meters as of right. So that's going to happen regardless. So what we felt was more beneficial to the community was retaining that open park-like feel so that people can continue to travel like they do now through the site to King Street and unimpeded. I mean, there would be no reason to impede them. So the layout here on the bird's eye is showing those view corridors are preserved from King and full access through the site is maintained. That would be lost under the current zoning regime. So we think that's important for the neighborhood.
Okay, Jennifer, you had a question?
I was going to agree with the comments regarding the streetscape and how the large flat wall creates the barrier, and possibly looking at how to mitigate that with, again, you were saying the height of the roof, even maybe looking at like a mansard roof so that it's still inhabitable in the 3rd story, but that brings the scale more to a residential level, and possibly pushing in and out to break up that wall, was my first comment. And the second actually was going back to the demolition and just wondering what sort of considerations were given to keep what's there, even if it's not used structurally. I understand structurally is what is possibly the problem with it. So yeah,
Sure. Okay, so on this view from Baden Street, I have a slightly recessed stairwell. So it gives that articulation, kind of breaks it up. It's also transparent. You can see through it. So I think that is, a benefit that will be the case for property owners across the street. You will also have, it somewhat lit at night. So that's one feature. Talking about the parish hall, there are so many things wrong with the parish hall. It was built as a stable, right? All the stone, as far as we can determine, were cast-offs from the building of the church. They were never good quality stones. They were used in a stable. Then, in 1989, when they renovated into the parish hall and used it for about 25 years as a parish hall, a lot of the construction that was undertaken does no longer meet building code. So we would have to dismantle, in order to utilize this building, we have to dismantle it and rebuild it. So our estimate was about $600,000. We've also heard about reusing the stones in some fashion. Because they were cast-offs and they were then mortared with Portland cement, they're fracturing. So if we disassemble it, they're probably going to just fracture. We have offered it to the Archdiocese for use in the construction of the church, but I suspect that their stonemason will reject them. So if there are any units that we can utilize, I should probably go back to that slide. So if there were any units that we could utilize, they could only be used, let's say, for a landscaping feature, like a little wall or something like that, if they can be reused. Also, over time, it's morphed from an outbuilding into a parish hall. There have been so many alterations done to the building, there's very little that's actually original in it. So the interior, exterior, Andre Scheinman and I looked at it. There is just so many changes. Window openings have changed. That red circle at the front of the parish hall, former parish hall, that's all new stone. That's not original stone. That was brought when it was converted to the parish hall. I think there was actually a stable door, and they just filled it in, and it's a veneer. It's not even full units, it's a veneer. I addressed all that in the HIS that we're preparing.
awesome. Yeah, because I noticed that Andre had said in his report that the stone was in like relatively good condition. That's
Yeah,
why-
he, on first blush, and then we had Concord Engineering, and Ryan loves this term, crazed with cracks. Some of them were like completely friable in part. So if we dismantle them, they're going to potentially fall apart.
Okay, I'm going to take, first of all, Don, can you take the chair?
Yes.
And in light of time, I'm just going to put some questions, not necessarily looking for answers. I saw Ontario Trust easement in this material, and I'd be interested next time you come back to know the details of that, because I know that can trip us up all over the place. Secondly, if you could go on to the next slide, on to number 11.
Number 11? Okay.
In my mind, if you want to keep the view, at least at the back of the church, open, I would be tempted to move the unit behind the church through 90 degrees and put it basically where you've got lot 5 printed there, so that you really open up the view from Baden Street and the view as you come down there, and have a much more open area. So that's one I'd like you to consider. The parish hall, the one word I haven't yet heard is move. And you will be amazed how many buildings in Kingston have in fact been demolished and been moved and rebuilt. And I suggest that we keep that one in mind. On the buildings, a couple of comments. Firstly, I think those are much too large. I think you need to keep in mind the size of the rectory windows. Secondly, I do not like, and this committee does not like, shutters which do not close off the windows. And I'm also concerned about the stone patterns you've got on the corners there. They're usually much more regular than that. So there's a few comments to think about. And as I say, I don't need answers now, but they are things to think.
Certainly.
Unless you want to make comments immediately, but...
Well, we thought you'd like shutters and quoining, so we'll remove them. No problem.
Okay. And Matthew, you had a hand as well.
To the slide of the parish hall.
Of the parish hall, yeah.
Yeah, please. I think like we were talking about the condition of it and the alterations made, and other committee members can correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the preserving these assets as they stand and not bring them to one particular point in time is that they serve as like a conduit for knowledge through time, and those alterations speak to that, right? And so I think often you have to take those in considerations. And it's not like we've chose the day in 18 whatever, that's how it was, and we will dress it that way forever. And so I think like it's worth considering that. So like that's a noteworthy alteration. Like maybe it was a stable door and then its function changed, and so that's why it's like that. And it's worth noting and keeping. But back to what Jen was saying about the roof lines and maybe serving with a mansard roof, like bring down the scale. There's probably lots of alternative things like that, like running a parapet with a flat roof would bring the height down drastically.
We tried a shallow hip roof, which reduces it slightly.
Yeah.
You think that might be better?
Well, I'm assuming that you're going for the gabled roof because you get to use
Because
truss.
it's a common in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like a flat roof would bring the cost down, or not bring the height down drastically.
An image for you.
Yeah.
Obviously,
there's a cost consideration there.
Yeah.
Or if there's mechanical in the attic space. But I mean, if you had a parapet or a mansard roof, which could also serve as a parapet, you could hide all the mechanical stuff still behind there if that's what's up there, and really bring it down to a more human scale.
We are putting mechanicals in the roof.
In the attic.
Yeah, in the attic. Yeah, that's one issue. I'll let Greg jump in. We're messing in with his design, so I don't want to go too far. But Greg, is there anything you want to comment on?
Is that it? On? Okay. Counterintuitive. In terms of the roof design, I mean, we're not wed to any particular approach. We've tried 3 different approaches. Obviously, a flat roof could work quite well, and you're absolutely right. It would reduce the structure. We could even look at making it potentially a green roof for sustainability aspects. So obviously, all of that's on the table.
Like to Don's point about treating the site as a whole, I think like reducing the height really is similar to treating those buildings sympathetic to the rest of the buildings in their significance and importance. So like you drop in the height will really drown them out to the actual asset, which is the remaining buildings, right? So that would be something I would work towards that because I think it would help a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Jane?
Thanks. Just in view of the fact that it's a Portsmouth Village Heritage Character Area, I'm wondering if we should be looking at a heritage impact statement for the entire property. And I too have concerns about the height and massing, and I haven't really, these designs are a little bit different from what the ones that I looked at and commented on, but I think all of my comments that I put on Dash still stand from my point of view. So, and I'm not going to review them now, but I would like you to take them into consideration. I'm also concerned about the positioning of the buildings and how close they are to McDonald Street, and I guess that's Baden Street.
There's McDonald.
I'd like to revisit that. I'd like you to consider how close they are to the street, and I'm sure they require a zoning. They don't fit in with the setback required, I'm sure.
They meet the current required setback.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
And
I mean, so any single family home would be the same kind of setback.
Whoa, from
that would be
McDonald
built there.
Street?
There would be 2 built on McDonald currently if we went with the current site plan.
Okay, well, anyway, I just would like to draw your attention to my comments on
Yes.
Dash, and you can review them. And I do think we should have a heritage impact statement done for the entire property, because this is a significant development, and it's going to have a significant effect on the neighborhood, and I am concerned about height and massing.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any last, Matthew?
As far as the setback, I'm not familiar with the zoning for that particular area, but I think like this is something you go around and you see buildings that don't fit in because of the unfortunate mid-century zoning that was blanketed on them, on the area. And so I think especially in this neighborhood where it's like a heritage conservation district and you're trying to serve the character and function of the rest of the neighborhood, it's probably really worth observing the historic precedent for what the street wall is so that it would fit in. Because like, although they might be close, I don't know if that fits with the like you wouldn't want it to be in front of the rectory wall, but you wouldn't want it to be way back either, because then it would look silly. Those sorts of things are like really subtle nuances, but cumulatively they add up to something looking out of place. And I think in like in a heritage conservation area, it's probably really worth taking in the historic precedent for how the buildings were placed. I don't know, maybe staff can back me up on that, but I think that's like a thing that happens a lot. Like when you see infill projects in other neighborhoods, and then they're observing, like in my neighborhood, there's 8499, and it's just this like hilarious thing where this one house is 15 feet back from the other ones, and it just looks stupid. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that would be worth considering here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. I really appreciate your relationship and partnership with the Archdiocese and the archives, and I also acknowledge the cost. Like, this is not a cheap endeavor, and you are trying to create something that fits in the community. And again, I really appreciate how you're trying to match the brickwork and the stonework. Unfortunately, the massing is the issue that will come up in the community. So I do think that with a bit of architectural design, perhaps the third floor could have dormers and the roof line kind of heads away from the street. I think a flat roof will just create a rectangular box, and that will not be attractive at all, and I don't think you'll achieve what it is that you're trying to achieve, which is to basically fit into an area that, on Baden, they're actually quite low-level houses. Like the rectories on King Street and McDonald, that's a higher area, but the houses on Baden are quite low. So I think it's an architectural, I think you're going to get there through some architectural designs, and yeah, perhaps consider dormers or in the roof line away from the street on the third floor. Thanks.
Just in response, Councillor, we're thinking of whole-book information centers. I think that might be worth doing. Yeah.
Okay, members of the public, comments? Yes, sir. Can you state your name?
Thank you very much, Gerritsen. I used to be a representative of this area, having lived in the Portsmouth area since the mid-1950s, and my sister still lives there. I was involved in the original rezoning application that created 5 lots that I think was overwhelmingly received well by the community at both an informal public meeting held at the church about a year and a half ago, and later on by a public meeting that was held under the Planning Committee Act. And I realize you're only dealing with the heritage aspect here, and it's very difficult to separate the heritage aspect from the planning issues. I think the planning issues relate as to whether or not the request here isn't for too many units there, because certainly that whole area is basically single family, although it is going through a change with the new hospital being built there so a couple of years ago, and there have been a number of other applications approved that I think that Councillor Neal would know about just a little bit further down the road on Portsmouth Avenue just recently. So having said that, I think that the only recommendation that I would suggest to the committee is that no decision be made with respect to the demolition of the coach house. And the coach house has been a lot of things over the 60 years that I'm familiar with it. It used to be a bingo hall where every Thursday night there was bingo held by the church community, and it was a totally different building from what's there now. What's there now was basically built in the late 1980s, and I doubt that very much of the current building was part of the old building, but I'll just leave that aside. If it's designated, it's designated, and it may be the only way, quite frankly, in which the city might have a hold on the developer here to make sure that the development takes place in accordance to what the city as a whole, both the planning, the council, and your committee thinks is desirable for that area. I would just strongly, and the pictures that we see here today are a lot better than what we saw 6 weeks or so ago, or 2 months ago, at the Portsmouth Villagers Association. I think there is a sense that they're trying to build the building material along the same lines as the rectory. That I think has been an improvement. But the real question that the council will have to address and that planning has to address as to whether or not these 12 units aren't too much for that particular neighborhood, because in that immediate area, within about a 2-block area, I don't think there's a building that's more than a single-family dwelling. I could be mistaken. It could be the odd duplex there. I'm currently, that as far as I'm concerned. So I would just suggest to you that no decision be made by this committee until the planning issues, and that is the size of the development, has been determined by City Council. And let me also commend you on the great work that you're doing here, having sat here for the last 3 hours or so, listening to the various presentations that have been made to you. I think the Heritage Committee and Heritage in Kingston is strong and active. And let's never forget, one of the reasons why so many people come here from so many other places is because of the heritage ambiance of our city, which is sometimes denigrated by individuals, but it's something I think that this city and the tourism industry that we have in this community thrive on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for saying. Well, it will be duly written, I'm sure. Thanks, John. Other comments from the public? Okay, so there is no recommendation needed from this. The applicants have heard your comments, heard your concerns, heard your supports. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will move on to the last couple of items.
Deal with the correspondence, because it has that motion attached to it, so we can deal with that now.
We'll do the working groups first?
Okay, we can do the working groups first. Then
Just go in order, yeah. So the working groups on page 200, you've got Heritage Properties Working Group. If there are any questions from that, they probably can go to Ryan, who I think was the only person present there. Cultural heritage and heritage assets, I believe, have not been meeting recently. Emergency updates.
We just need to motion to accept.
Oh, a motion, sorry, to accept the Heritage Properties Working Group reports. Done and seconded by Zoe. Those in favour? Those opposed? Thank you very much. Emergency approvals, we had any? Nope, so we can go through that. Now, the appointments of members to working groups. We have, for the Cultural Heritage Working Group, part of the addendum that Christo Evelis, Rodney Carter, Patricia Fiore, and Megan Kerrigan be appointed to the Cultural Heritage Working Group for a term expiring November 30, 2019. Councillor Neal, seconded by... Who's going to move? Councillor Doherty, how about that?
Now, I guess we'd see if there's any committee members that also want an opportunity to be a part of that as well. They can volunteer.
This is the Cultural Heritage Working Group. You are able to volunteer for that. And seeing no immediate move, we will leave that motion as it stands. Moved and seconded. Those in favour? Those opposed, so those 4 members come, and you have the Heritage Assets Working Group that Jennifer Nicol, Barb Neatby, Kathy Carcutt, Bill Visser, and Patricia Fiore be appointed to the Heritage Assets Working Group for a term expiring November 30th, 2019. Looking for a mover. Don for a seconder. Matthew for volunteers to also join those groups. I think you're probably welcome if you just showed up as well, wouldn't they be?
Yes.
Yeah, wouldn't be thrown out, let's put it that way. Those in favour of that motion? Those opposed? Thank you very much. Any notices of motion? Any other business? Yeah, Matthew.
Can you just use the
Microphone?
mic, Matt?
Sorry. One of the things that we do here is we reference like municipal policy whenever staff's making a recommendation. So there'll be like the guidelines for window repairs and masonry repairs. Article, I think it's like number 8 or something on the masonry policy, is that it can be updated by us. And I was wondering if how we go about doing that. If there's a particular group for that. I know on the agenda, there's like an item at the beginning that says policy development and implementation. So is that a thing that we can do? Can we work towards updating some of the policy as well as adding to it? I mean, there's no provisions for roofing. When someone puts a roof on, there's no policy to back up what we think is a good idea. And that might help moving forward.
Brian, do you want to comment on that one? Or Young?
Excuse me, Chair. So I think the review of the mason windows policy, excuse me, is something that we could probably look at the working group level. So the Heritage Properties Working Group might be the best group to look at the 2 policies. I know the members have had a lot of exposure to the 2, and there may be some efficiencies there in looking at the review through that group. And staff can then support that review, but I think it would actually benefit from having the involvement of a broader group than having staff go away and work on it potentially.
So we will keep you when that happens. Obviously, you've got an interested person, qualified interested person. Correspondence. You've got on your addendum a correspondence dated today, subject 218 Albert Street. At the regular meeting of Kingston City Council last night, whereas 218 Albert Street has been recognized as a building of heritage interest but is not yet protected by either a designation nor a listing, and whereas the statutory meeting was held at Planning Committee suggesting the demolition of this building, which makes this a time-sensitive consideration, and whereas the community have expressed concern about the loss of this circa 1880 building, be it resolved that Council requests that Heritage Kingston consider requesting that staff and the Heritage Properties Working Group review the merits of seeking heritage protection for 218 Albert Street at their next meeting held on February the 20th, 2019, and the Heritage Properties Working Group is 26th. Looking for a mover for this?
Just if I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, do comment on it.
Just to provide a bit of background for people. So this request did come from council at the meeting last night. So what is requested of the committee is to put forth a motion requesting that the Heritage Properties Working Group review the merits of seeking heritage protection. So that's all that would be happening at this meeting, is that basically this request would go to Heritage Property to examine. So it's up to the committee whether or not they want to do this, but it's just been requested by council. So take that in consideration. I believe Councillor Neal has some more information for us.
Yeah, this came out at our last plan committee meeting just over a week ago or 10 days ago. There was a motion that came up, something that came forward that would have meant a demolition of this property, 218 Albert Street. Now, it's on the longer list to be considered, and there were a number of people that stepped forward at the public meeting expressing a concern and an understanding that this property had heritage merit. We also heard shortly after that from Helen Finley, from Mr. Bray came yesterday in delegation to speak at council to speak to the heritage merits of this, and it's also been published with Jennifer McHenry, recognizing it as a property with merit. So this motion was brought forward to council yesterday. A motion from me, seconded by Rob Hutchison, asking that this be fast-tracked through the Heritage Properties Working Group as for your decision whether this has heritage merit and therefore should be on a protected list, either as listed or designated, because it was facing, and this is what made it time sensitive, it was facing fairly imminently demolition. And even today, the owner could go forward and request a demolition permit, and the city would be obligated to give it to him. I want to thank our planning committee, our planners rather, our planning department, because they spoke to the gentleman who owns the property, and he in fact said that he would step back and not request a demolition permit immediately, and would give this committee and working group an opportunity to look at into this. There was an excellent, and perhaps we could ask our clerk to share that with this group, but there was an excellent letter from Helen Finley pointing out the three categories and suggesting that all three were being met on this. It was a property that I believe was an 1890s construction. It has a twin just a couple doors down at 208, built by the same builder. As far as the history of this, Agnes Etherington lived in this property. Her partner, Richard, who was very involved turn of the century in the Queen's community, was also there. The most recent person living there, other than it's now a student rental, but was John Meisel, who had a very important role in Kingston over the years. So from, I think it very much deserves some consideration and recognition. If someone wants...
Is that speech moving?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Seconder? Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Any further discussion? Okay, those in favor? Those opposed? Thank you very much. Any other business?
And my apologies, I need to run to a 1 o'clock meeting now.
And
thank you very
please
much.
note item 13, we are not meeting here next month. We are meeting out at John Counter Boulevard. If you know the building there, if you've taken your recycling, then you've just gone past it. There's parking in the front, and we'll work out how you get access to an otherwise inaccessible building. Bridget? The one, no, it's the one on John Counter.
John Counter.
No, this is the whole meeting will be there. The April meeting is out there as well, and then we come back here. The council chamber is booked for other meetings, so we get bumped.
Could I just say my regrets for the working group? I hate having suggested something going to the working group and then I'm not there. But I'll be in Dublin. So I guess regrets aren't really an honest term. But my fellow councillor will represent the city and what transpired at council at that working group meeting, which I believe is next week. Thank you.
Good. Any items, Bridget?
Peter, regrets to the next meeting because I'm actually in a training session with AMO, which is for new councillors, so I have to give my regrets.
Staff, thank you much. Everybody, thank you. See you next month, if not before. When it'll be nice and bright and sunny and